still sort of waking up because I had family over earlier, and then I absolutely crashed. It was supposed to be at 1:30, I believe. Then I rescheduled it to 8. I mean, yeah, I rescheduled it to 6 actually, and yeah, I slept through it. How's everybody going today? I hope you are having happy holiday or whatever. Who wants to basically just tear this Hiten video apart? Because I posted about it a bit ago. Here you go. Of frustration and fatigue won the poll by a landslide. Of Slug and Slaughter, which I kind of think is personally worse, got 13, and of Music and Massacre got the same thing, but out of 8 votes, frustration and fatigue. Wait, whoops. Okay. I hate when it does that. Why do I have to manually switch the friggin' thing? Okay, there we go. But yeah, Slugs and Slaughter got 13. Music and Massacre also got 13. Frustration and Fatigue at 75. So we're gonna watch this one. Oh my god. And you're just gonna see how bad this thing is. 'Cause god damn, Hiten sucks.
It wouldn't be me if I didn't start beef with a random mangaka that not a single one of you have ever heard of before. You thought you were going to be exposed to my analog horror takes? I haven't even begun to unleash my autism upon you. Hello there, my lovely legionnaires. I've been sitting on this video for a little while, but I've wanted to talk about these manga for a very long time. I read 2 of these manga when I was younger, and I read the last one for you today. It's about time I talk about my enemy, Yoshiki Tonagai.
Hold it! What the hell is that shit?
Yoshiki Tonagai is a mangaka who started his career in manga as an assistant to a name you may have heard of before, Atsushi Okubo. A few of you have tilted your heads because it sounds familiar and you can't place where, and I'll just jog your memory by telling you he's the creator of Soul Eater and Fire Force. His first foray into proper manga was actually not his own work, but rather the manga adaptation of Higurashi When They Cry's time-killing arc. He only did the artwork, where the writing was done by our man Ryukishi 7. From there, he went on to write his own mysteries, the Doubt trilogy. Now, I only know that these series are meant to be connected because they all make use of the same rabbit head mascot. That stupid fucking mascot head is literally the only thing that connects the 3 stories we'll be reading today. Doubt, Judge, and Secret. Before you start, I know there's a 4th manga that he's written called Dead Company, and I know the stupid fucking rabbit head is in that too. But I read in an interview that it was only meant to be a trilogy, so I'm taking Tonagai at his own statement, and I'm not reading more of these things than I have to. Now, here's the thing about these manga. They're just bad. There's, of course, a few things I find morally bankrupt about it, but it isn't raw disgust like there was with Urban Spook. There's just this kind of raw, unfiltered ineptitude to handling mysteries that makes me kind of irate, that I've been told repeatedly is very funny to listen to, so now I'm sharing that anger with you. The video's long enough, so we're gonna start at the beginning, with Tonagai Sensei's 2009 manga debut, and where I started my journey many years ago, Doubt.
Let's show those dense motherfuckers some logic.
Our story opens with a description of the game Rabbit Doubt, which is just werewolf, mafia, amogus. Now, I love these hidden role battle royale manga. I think everyone has their kind of trash, and this is mine. This was an interesting setup to something
And you are mine.
that was going to totally fall the fuck
I
apart
like
in a
watching
couple
this
of
trash.
chapters. By the way, we never talk about the video game again. We meet Yu, our protagonist, and his childhood friend Mitsuki. She's shopping with her dad for an event that's occurring tomorrow. Put a pin in that. Yu doesn't remember what that is. Wonder if that'll be important too. Also put a pin in that. Yu bumps into two more characters named Haruka and Eiji. Apparently, Eiji's been playing the game with Yu for a while, but decides to basically threaten him in public for giggles? He says it's a joke, but what's the bit? To scare Yu because they've never met in person? Why? Welcome to inconsistent character writing. You better get used to it. Mitsuki's never played before, so we explain the game again, and we're given the detail that these phone charms identify who's playing the game because it's an incredibly popular phone game. Another pin. We learn Mitsuki's a hard ass with a cop dad. Haruka sexually harasses Yu, and we meet Rika. Sorry, Ray. I'll get more into character design when we see the whole cast. Just, At karaoke that night, Eiji sexually harasses Ray, which is wild considering.
And when she gets to the character design, you will see how fucking dumb she is.
She looks 12 and is in a wheelchair, so he physically restricts her movement, which is creepy and weird. I don't think we get a hard and fast number on her age, but the implication is that she's their age, I guess. I don't know, I'm digressing. We discover that Ray is on a show called Simon Shoujo, where she performed acts of hypnotism. Remember this. It's going to be the source of some real bullshit later. Yu says he believes in hypnotism, and we'll get there. Oh god. Eiji overhears and is a huge dick, and we learn that Ray's show failed because rumor come out, it was fake. We find out she's in the wheelchair because she tried to isekai herself, and okay. I have to talk about the art for a minute. Far be it from me to be mean to a fellow artist, but good fucking god. A recurring issue with these stupid books is that Tonagai Sensei's artwork sucks. Weird proportions, terrible posing, it's bad overall, and I will talk about those other two things later, but the worst is his expression work and the way he draws violence. The second part will also come later, but look at this weak-ass expression. She's supposed to be sobbing that after trying to kill herself, she became a recluse, and this is a profoundly emotional moment for her, and that's it. Sad. Naturally, all the conflict disappears immediately after a single weak conversation. Our proper game begins with Yu being knocked out, being brought to a secondary location, and Ray being literally crucified. Okay, we're getting shit rolling. The mystery man that appears out of nowhere is Hajime.
This bit is going to get seriously annoying because she's going to do this like 4 fucking times throughout the video.
3 years after. Okay, you win this round. From here, I'm going to be really scooting through this, mainly because there's a lot of fluff that does not matter. Everyone is marked with a barcode that can open 1 door each, meaning we can only open 6 doors total. Haruka opened the room that everyone is in, now we have 5. A fight breaks out, Yu's knocked out, time progresses without him, which I'm sure was not a cheap tactic for characters to lie. Eiji gets locked up for that and opening the bathroom without asking, now we're down to 4. Yu lied, he doesn't have a barcode, now we have 3. Hajime opens up the medical room, we have 2. So in the course of 1 chapter, we've lost 66% of our options. Good fucking god, this pacing is a hummingbird on Adderall. In the back is a Five Nights at Freddy's style monitor room, complete with corpse-filled mascot. Never mind, he's alive. Never mind, he drops dead. Good, cool, sure. We resume the status quo, I guess. He has a barcode we immediately use, so nothing changes there. Observe a pattern. It's a records room. It turns out Mitsuki's records are in a book filled with everyone else's, so maybe her being here wasn't an accident. Haruka attacks her and it locks her in the bathroom. We figure out Yu was lying. He's tied up and beaten to admit that he's the wolf. He doesn't, because he's not. Eiji is murdered. Woo! We see him get attacked with an axe, but he's hanged? The door is opened, but can't be opened all the way. We find Ray's phone in Eiji's hand, so we conveniently have his bar code. Wait a minute. Why does the killer give them more options if the whole point is to kill them one by... God damn it, never mind. I'm just gonna keep going. Hajime's a suspect. Eiji might have killed someone. That's why he's here. Now Haruka's a suspect, so... Okay, hang on. Here's where you start losing me. Hajime spins to us that Haruka was a witness to the murder, so she knows for sure it was Eiji, right? There's a bunch of extenuating circumstances that wouldn't have gotten him arrested. Fair, fine. What loses me are 3 details. First, if the crime committed is murder, what the fuck did they kill Ray? The gang is like, oh, it's for being a fake psychic, but like, we can all agree that's dumb as hell, right? Ah, yes, these 2 totally equal crimes of playing up psychic powers for TV and beating someone to death. That's like if Lassiter found out Sean was faking it and then just shot him. Second, it said that Eiji started playing Rabbit Doubt after he couldn't box anymore. Fair, fine, I'll buy that. However, we're expected to believe that Haruka somehow knew he'd started playing, who he was in-game, and found him right away? You didn't know what he looked like, so there's no way in-game she could have known, and even if he was stupid enough to use his real name, there's no way of telling that it was that Eiji. Was she just harassing random dudes named Eiji until she found the guy? Finally, if it's such an intensely personal motive, like killing someone she cared about, why the fuck is everyone else here? Was she just killing random people to hide it? Yes, this girl in the wheelchair I saw on TV should be crucified for faking being a psychic. I'll yank her and 3 other random nobodies in this back room and kill them to cover up the murder I actually am invested in. That's insane. You're insane for trying to get me to buy that. So we all agree that nothing about this motive makes any goddamn sense, so naturally everyone just sits around considering it. Thank God that you questions only one of the flaws in the argument, and the framing paints that as a stupid thing to have said. I fucking hate it here. A note is made that nobody but the killer could have opened Eiji's door, and you begins to doubt Haruka because she... Wait. No, she couldn't have had the master key. You...
Like, exactly. Like, I'm not gonna listen to Heaton's criticism about a manga's art until she puts a manga out. Like, you become a serialized mangaka, and then you can complain about shit, Heaton.
Saw it! You idiots watched her fail to open another door! That's how we learned it was 1 door per barcode! Oh my god, this is killing me. This was the point in my original reading that I'd figured it out, because there was literally only 2 people we'd not seen use their barcode, and one of them was dead. They find a random phone that Mitsuki picks up, only to hear, "For the one I love." Use 2 brain cells immediately die, and we now believe it's Haruka despite the mountains of evidence about why it isn't. Another door opens behind them while Haruka's still locked up, furthering the fact that it couldn't possibly be her, and we find the murder room and another door! In said murder room, we find more files implying the Death Game classic. This isn't the first game! Apparently Rabbit Doubt is for this, but... Okay, we'll get there when we get there. Pin it. Mitsuki passes out from a severe injury that she got earlier, but hasn't been relevant till now. We finally find Haruka's severed head. It's almost like... We now switch back to thinking it was Hajime, despite him being tied up literally this whole time, the murder room's door opening from the inside, and either you being next to him or in front of the only door he could have opened. We see Mitsuki dead on the monitors, the boys attack each other before we see a new person on the monitors. Hajime points out that Yu's a moron, and we saw everyone try to open another door, but loses his own brain cells by insinuating that Yu double bluffed and actually had a barcode this whole time. This is so fucking stupid, because we saw that it wasn't on his stomach or wrists, so it would either have to be on his tits, on his back, or on his leg, which would make opening the doors a little fucking noticeable. Hajime gets got, and now it's showdown time. Yu finally has the brainwave that the killer had to be standing in the room while he got his phone, which still doesn't make sense, and a Scooby-Doo chase takes place. Yu gets knocked out, wakes up on the railing, and our killer was Mitsuki, the only person it could have fucking been. Apparently she'd been doing this because people lie. Ray lied about being a psychic. Haruka was apparently pimping out other teenage girls. Hajime killed a girl in a training accident while he was in medical school. And you told people he had a barcode. This motive fucking sucks. It's been shown to us that Mitsuki was a hard ass who didn't like crime when she smacked Eiji for smoking and drinking underage. Fair. Why wouldn't her motive to be killing criminals who got away with it? Ray could have been fraud, we could have had 2 murderers, and Ghislaine Maxwell over here. So why the fuck was lying the reason? So you'd have an excuse to kill you? It doesn't make any goddamn sense at all. Not to mention all the logistical issues. If she killed Eiji, how did she get from her spot on the floor to his room to kill him back to her spot on the floor before anyone saw her on either the cameras or in the hallway? How the fuck did she decapitate Haruka, get her severed fucking body strung up in the rafters in her uniform so you would think it was her without anyone noticing? Why did she hack off Eiji's hand when it would have been smarter for her to just leave the fucking door locked and sneak out because neither you nor Hajime could have fucking opened it? She literally had a locked room murder on her hands. You have a skeleton key. Why did you give them more room access?
Bro,
Supposedly
it's a
Mitsuki
manga.
killed
Just
these
turn your
people for her
fucking
dad who
brain
tried
off.
to kill himself after being tricked into a
Stop
bad loan.
thinking about it so hard.
But that's also just a crime.
Just turn your brain off.
Oh, we're almost free. Apparently, Hajime was actually a detective the whole time and had moved Haruka's body to try and trick you into slipping up and was just provoking everyone else this whole time, which was the dumbest thing he could have done to catch a murderer. Ah, yes, I, the master detective, will now prod people I suspect to be serial killers directly to their faces. What's he gonna do? Stab me? Ah, how unforeseen! I have been stabbed! Apparently, Haruka attacked Mitsuki, leading her to be cut on the chest, but when Hajime made her take off her uniform to check, she hid it somehow, some way he couldn't have seen it, or bandages, or a patch job in this dirty warehouse. Apparently, the real lie that Mitsuki was pissed about was that Yu was out with another girl, buying Mitsuki's birthday present. Doc, I fucking hate it here. In a sequence of events so badly illustrated, I genuinely do not understand what the fuck is happening. Mitsuki's throat is slashed. There's a noise, and it's Ray standing. Okay, listen. I'm so fucking exhausted of this stupid fucking trope of, oh, I could stand the whole time! Like, fucking, okay. First, pretending that ambulatory wheelchair users don't exist for your really shitty mystery is one thing. It's an ableist thing, and I hate it, but I'm so fucking exhausted of this lame trope of someone faking a disability. I don't get it. People fake disabilities all the time. Yeah, for attention, or money, or something of the like, not to get away with murder. In fact, disabled people are more commonly victims of murder than anything else. There was no benefit to it. She did it for sympathy. She didn't need to be in a wheelchair for that. She could have told them the story at the beginning of her jumping in front of the truck. I think that would have been enough. Literally the exact same outcome would have occurred, and we wouldn't have had the worst trope ever. Now, let me get through this. We're almost done. Ray was in on it the whole time. Apparently, she'd actually hypnotized Mitsuki through the TV months ago and was pretending to be her father to help her kill random people for revenge about being exposed on TV. Now, let's, for a minute, take a collective breath, okay? What? Okay, so apparently her father tried to kill them both by flipping the car, and it only killed him. Fine, sure. Why couldn't that have actually been the story? Why did she lie about that? That makes no fucking sense. Why didn't that just actually put her in the wheelchair? How the fuck did she find the people she had hypnotized so that she could manipulate them in the first place? How many were there? Just Mitsuki and Jeremy over there in the suit from the beginning? Why did she John Kramer herself at the beginning of this game if she needed to be actively manipulating Mitsuki? If literally anyone walked into the room and saw her not crucified, then the whole plan goes to shit, because she needed to manually re-up Mitsuki's hypnotism during the game. That's what the phone thing was about, by the way. Also, hey, quick question. What were you going to do if they wanted your barcode? Listen, I've read enough fuck shit to know that if I'm in a fucking saw trap and I get 6 keys and more than 6 doors, I'm using every key. You had 2 very bad options ahead of you. Either they take you down and realize you weren't dead, or they take the smarter route and hack your fucking leg off. What the fuck then, super genius? What were you going to do when they realized you had a fucking master key cutie mark? Also, while we're here, how did you fake the crucifixion? That shit is just totally dropped, by the way. Just thought you should know that. They never talk about how the fuck she did that. They also dropped the fact that she was finding people through Rabbit Doubt. Was she using a pre-existing game, a la Craigslist Killer? Or did she make the Funny Rabbit game purely to murder random players? Did she just run wildly extensive background checks to find out if these people had ever told a white lie to their girlfriend about if their ass looked fat? What the fuck was the plan? How was she getting this information that was in the file folders in the first place? Was it the fucking opioid-addicted lackey she had? Was she also getting a fucking black hat hacker this whole time? Was she hypnotizing him, too? This twist makes no fucking sense, and neither did the original murder reveal. Fuck! Okay, last chapter. Ray decides to peace out and let you live. Why? God damn it, there's an axe wound in his leg. He's helpless. Why wouldn't you just kill him? There's literally nothing stopping you from just finishing the job you started. He was also some random nobody to you. There's literally no reason to let him live. He could have implicated... Fuck, okay, Jesus, I have to finish. Hajime didn't die and tells you, officer, the child hypnotized her, isn't gonna fly in court, because of course it wouldn't. And they can't implicate Ray because there's no evidence she was there. Hajime asks the forensics guy to look again and gets...
Just like everything Hiten overthinks it. No one's gonna explain
murdered by the guy Ray somehow has in the public police force who's also been hypnotized, and she tricks you into saying the key phrase again, waking Mitsuki from her fucking Winter Soldier sleeper cell agent, who is now the perfect Amanda to her John Kramer, and the story ends. So, I didn't like it.
I think I swallowed a bottle cap.
Oh yeah, we're doing these sections between each manga. If you want pure recap and no analysis, go back to your C-list manga tubers, bitch. I'm gonna be critical, but I get it. I don't write mysteries too often because I find that either I'm too smart for the people to figure it out and I make the clues too esoteric and difficult to understand, or I'm simply thinking too far ahead and it's impossible for them to know what I was thinking. The thing about this particular story is that a lot of the characters are basically brain dead at all times. Hajime has nothing to gain and everything to lose from not telling the other people present he's a detective. They can pool resources, he has their trust, and there's a far more interesting plot point going on in the background. I cannot stress to you how absolutely ridiculous and stupid it is for him to be just doing things like prodding random people and concealing his identity the whole time. Eiji and Haruka don't really add anything other than bodies on the pile, since for some stupid reason the gang spends most of their time separated. I don't know how to stress to y'all that it's absolutely ridiculous to spread out in a situation like this because they say so, and then proceed to do it! It's almost comedic how awful the choices that are made at any given minute are. That's not mentioning how absolutely insane Ray's plan and motive were. She confirms that the reason Mitsuki gives her is the truth, so it really is about targeting liars. I don't know why you would be killing random people about it when your through line seems to be revenge, though. Also, given how much manpower and money it would have taken to go through all this, we'd have to assume that her network is huge. But how? If she's totally disgraced, her parents are dead, and she's, 15? How the fuck is she organizing saw traps that she can then totally abandon and have no legal connection to them? Basically, it wears the trappings of an interesting mystery, but has absolutely nothing meaningful to chew on with it. That's doubly so when its characters are so incredibly flat. They're reduced down to character archetypes with no real subversion or attempts to make them interesting. They're paper dolls that are put into poses to get their respective backstories to the reader before we tear them in half. We just have to assume that Eiji was a bad person all along because we never get to speak to him about what happened on the night the kid died. We assume Haruka was a monster because we never get to talk to her about whether or not she was groomed into doing those things and victimizing others. There's no nuance or interest in exploring why people lie. The only person who ever gets any nuance is you, and even then, it's pretty weak. Nobody has the chance to grow or to explore the overarching theme of lies and revenge, and most disappointingly of all, Rabbit Doubt as a mechanism is dropped completely. It's on every cover, it's the title of the manga, it's what we get exposition on twice up at the top, but it's completely evaporated as relevant as soon as we wake up in the warehouse. It's supposedly the mechanism by which Rei gets everyone together, but it's only mentioned in passing, and it's only ever something that's used to monologue about lying. It's such a waste of a cool narrative through line and a mechanism for the story to take place. There's also the issue of the art. I touched upon this early on, but I want to go more in depth about it because it's going to be a persistent issue. Oh my god. Tonagai-sensei is a terrible artist. I mentioned...
Here we go. This part, when I first watched it, extremely pissed me the fuck off.
Earlier, how stiff and strange all of the expressions
This just goes to show how retarded Hiten actually is.
were, but in moments of tension, it becomes unbearable. No emotions show on these characters' faces, making moments that should be full of terror and fear fall totally flat. Spreads are totally boring and have awful composition, so moments that are supposed to have real punch just end up making them hard to follow. There's no sense of place in the warehouse. It's simultaneously huge and tiny, depending on the moment, and for it being totally run down, there's kind of no indicator of it. Then there's the action sequences. Any and all action and violence are composed so badly, I have zero idea what they're trying to convey. I still don't know how Mitsuki got her throat slashed. Was it you who lashed out at her? Did she pass out on the scalpel? I can't fucking tell. There's also the problem that moments where characters pass out or are injured don't make any sense either. The whole story is rendered incomprehensible frequently because of the way that the action scenes are drawn. It's like shaky cam in bad horror flicks. I don't know where we are, who got hurt, how. This problem is widely exacerbated by how awful the character designs are. All of the main characters look alike. The only one who stands out is Rei, which draws more unnecessary attention to her. Without color, Haruka and Mitsuki look so similar.
These two look nothing alike at all. How are you this stupid? Her face is wider. Her hair is darker. Her eyes are
There's
bigger.
action to her. Without color,
Her frame is smaller. These two look nothing alike. Her head's a bit taller. Her head is wider. Her head is taller. And her eyes are slimmer. These two look nothing alike at all. How are you this dumb, Hiten? And of course, obviously, her titties are bigger. But
Haruka
still.
and Mitsuki look so similar, there's
No, they don't.
actually scenes where I forget who is who. The worst of it, though, are the boys. They're all the same dude. The only thing that separates Eiji from the other two boys is hair color. If I colored these panels black, you'd never be able to tell them apart. Their hair's styled the same length, their face shapes are the same. I mean, all of them have the same face, it's really a problem. But there's the issue of the violence as well, right? For the way that the story was marketed and framed, the violence is so fucking lacking. Gore is practically non-existent, which isn't necessarily always a bad thing, but with moments where...
Shit, for most horror, you just need to turn your brain off and just let it happen. A lot of horror is just mind-numbing murder. Especially slashers, which is what this is. This is a slasher. And nothing more. Hiten doesn't understand slashers. Slashers are just mind-numbing horror. Not mind-numbing murder. Turn your fucking brain off and just get immersed.
where throats are slashed or stakes are in chests, there's next to no blood. We have a decapitation, but even with Hajime hiding her body, Haruka's blood should be all over the fucking place. So should Eiji's, as a matter of fact, since we hacked off one of his hands. He should have been bleeding like a stuck pig until his heart stopped pumping. It makes all of the violence feel defanged and weak when this is supposed to be a game about killing each other. It has a lot of schlocky slasher vibes, which you know I love, but it's so lame when I could be reading Maria's Revenge and watching a teenage boy get his dick chainsawed. It skips being a January horror flick and goes right to DVD, when there's better stuff to be read. It's just boring and toothless with no real bite left. What changes would I have made if I were Tonagai-sen's editor? Well, I'm not gonna do that this time. listen, I know I said I wanted to make it a staple of these types of videos, but you see that fucking time code. We're going through 3 whole serialized manga today, and since I want to give a more detailed story summary to get an idea of how badly these stories flow together, I'm losing the rewrites today. If your tears of woe fill up the comment section, maybe I'll make them their own videos. Trust. Just means we have to get our next story already. Let's get into 2010's Judge.
With their holy beams of the Lord.
Our second story begins with our protagonist, Hiro, his brother Atsuya, and his childhood friend Hikari shopping together. Hikari and Atsuya are dating, and she wants to get him a birthday present. Apparently, while Hiro and Hikaru have been childs for years, Atsuya is 4 years older than her. Ugh. Anyway, Hiro and Hikaru have known each other for longer, but she chose to go out with his older brother instead. Hiro clearly has feelings for her and is bitter she's going out with Atsuya, so when Hikaru leaves her phone behind, he takes the opportunity to tell him that their date on Christmas is an hour later than it actually is. Of course, because of that, Atsuya's isekai'd into a better written story. We transition smooth as a Braille dictionary to Hiro waking up in a cell, handcuffed and on the floor with a rabbit mask on his head. Apparently someone attacked him after school with a bat, which would have been cool to see, I guess. Glad you're just telling us. That's not going to be important later. Shouldn't put a pin in that. Anyway, as he bumbles around, he discovers that he's locked up in a courthouse and stumbles across a body, a bunch of other people in animal masks, a timer counting down, and a talking stuffed animal. This came out November 8th, 2010. Danganronpa came out 2 weeks after. God damn, 2 for 2. Fuck. Anyway, we discover that the other 8 people here were also knocked out and brought here. Horseman attacks the doll? This art can't communicate this well. There's a tape and a key inside. Key opens up the stand that a TV's sitting on. Pop that bad boy in, and sure enough, there's the doll again. When it tells them to take their masks off, our lion mask removes his and... Okay, this is a fucking side tangent, sorry. Look at this fucking panel. I hate this so fucking much. So this means nothing to most of you. I'm sure a few of you who aren't, like, well-versed artists are looking at this and being like, something about this is bad. Something about this is off. I'm about to outline it to you. The proportions here are so fucking bad. His head is huge, his hands are tiny, the pose is weirdly stilted, his ass is not holding that mask in his hands, and the perspective is atrocious. This kind of shit drives me bunk.
Yeah, he's not holding the mask in his hand. He's holding the mask with one hand, and on the other side, that's not showing, is holding in the other hand. Who fucking cares?
You don't have the slightest clue.
Hiten is just so dumb she has to nitpick everything.
Good God. After everyone takes their masks off, we're told that these people were summoned here to be judged for their sins. When the timer hits 0, they have to choose someone to kill. At the end of the game, there will only be 4 remaining. Are you sure it was 2 weeks? I have to keep looking at the date. I have to keep reminding myself. God damn. Once we've heard the spiel, naturally everyone makes the stupidest fucking decision imaginable and leaves to go sit in their own rooms until the bell tolls. Yeah, it's important to note that if they're not all in the same room when the timer goes off, they all die, so... Yeah, just split up and go into dark, windowless rooms where you have no sense of time and none of you can know when to get back to the main room. Right, smart choices, this gang. Hiro stays behind. We're introduced to Kazu, a character who will be one of the many bullets in Tonagai's feet before the end of this video. Hiro tells him the story before our lion mask, who we will find out later is named Hayato, shows up, and tries to start drama like the messy bitch he is. Time rolls around and we all group up, but the bear mask, Nobuyuki, has decided to fuck this stupid game and is just locking himself in his room so everyone dies. Our good boys decide to go and try and talk him out of time stalling, and we learn Kazu's sin. He's gay. Welcome to the worst segment of this fucking video. See, there's a recurring theme in this particular manga of most of the characters not having real sins, or of their sins being something that shouldn't be labeled the way it is or a sin at all. Kazu's is the first, and honestly the worst example of this. His sin is that he's a gay man, right? So it's lust! Now, I shouldn't have to explain to you how wildly homophobic it is to be actively punishing your gay character for literally just being gay and nothing else, but branding it as a sin of lust, holy fucking shit, Tonagai. Next we coax Nobuyuki out of his room with the power of plot armor, because oh my god, this fucking speech is terrible, and we learn his sin. So he's Sloth because he's a hikikomori. Listen, this one's a little complex, right? First of all, we assume he's being punished for killing his mother. That's not a sloth thing. I think, if anything, blindly killing a parent because you were mad at her judgment of you is a wrath choice, not a sloth choice, but who am I to say? I've never read the Bible. The other thing is that being a hikikomori isn't a laziness thing, usually, and it isn't depicted as one in this manga, either. Nobuyuki's terrified of going outside. We see him literally sitting on the floor in a fucking fetal position in the dark. This isn't a kid who wanted to lay around and play video games all day. This kid has a mental illness. Back to the story for now. Hiro gives the gang the very basic idea that if someone votes for themselves, then they can't all die. It's a good strategy because, like he says, you can do this deadlock and wait it out until help arrives. There's literally no reason to be killing each other if you do this. Remember that. There's no reason for anybody to kill each other. Everyone does this, and the first round is passed with no fatalities. After exploring a little and introducing each other, we find 2 new rooms, another bathroom, and a records room that's just full of court records. This would be great to figure out exactly where you are, seeing as you could see if any of the cases are versus the prefecture or city. Then you'd be able to know what building you were in, because there's only so many abandoned courthouses. Alright, cool, we're moving on, I guess. We all split up again, because that worked so well last time, and will continue to work so well. Hiro's plot senses tingle, and he goes to talk to Nobuyuki, who it turns out voted for Horseboy Ryuhei because he was being a loud, violent dick. Naturally, he continues to show his mislabeling by doing a school shooter monologue about how badly he wants to kill people who are shitty to him. Sloth, I guess. Hiro checks up on Ryuhei, who for fucking sure found a whole-ass gun in the TV case, but we're supposed to pretend we don't know what it is, like you can't fucking see it with your eyeballs. That's a gun. Look at how much of a gun that is. Sure, whatever. Naturally, we ignore the very visible Glock-shaped object that ends up being a revolver in his pocket, so we can go talk to Nobuyuki, who is our first victim. We reconvene, and apparently Hayato, Asami, the cat girl, and Ryuhei just voted for Nobuyuki and fucking ruined literally everything because they were morons who have now completely destroyed every ounce of trust the group would have had with each other for literally no reason. Naturally, they realize it's now them against the other 4, Hiro, Kazu, the pig girl, Miku, and the fox girl, Rina. And that's their whole plan has backfired. Hiro continues to be the worst, and wants to find a solution to a problem he knows nobody is going to listen to now that trust is totally broken down. Hayato approaches and shows him a letter that says the executioner is there amongst them, and it's tangent time again. Hiding this information was literally the stupidest thing that Hayato could have fucking done. He says the note was on him when he woke up. This should have been step numero uno to share with the rest of the group. There's literally no downside to it. It would have the executioner on the back foot to have the entire group constantly looking out for them, and hiding it would only make it easier for them to operate. Naturally, this makes Hayato obscenely fucking suspicious to hide this, and I would have immediately told everyone that he was hiding it and vote for him the next round. This was the dumbest shit in the world. Asami isolates Hiro after this and tries to fuck him to get him to trade sides. Naturally, he doesn't. Apparently someone saw her trying to fuck him, though, so that's a new wrinkle on things. When he returns to the group and suggests they vote for her last out of the 3 of them, he's immediately cross-examined by Rina for no real reason because he's right. Of the 3 people left, Ryuhei is objectively the biggest problem because he's a violent, unstable psychopath, and Hayato has been a weirdly antagonistic force since the jump, so of course, she'd be the lowest threat on the totem pole given the minute. Eventually, they'd make the right choice and decide to vote for Ryuhei until Hayato says they should vote for themselves again. Naturally, everyone does because they're fucking morons who buy into the fact that 3 people who were ready to commit homicide 20 minutes ago totally had a change of heart. Apparently, the images on the boards could be switched around, so they tricked them into thinking they'd voted for themselves and all voted for Kazu. Luckily for us, Kazu is in fact in contact with the heads of the game. He killed the guy at the beginning and put everyone's masks on because they were holding his mom hostage. Naturally, upon finding him and talking him out of giving up, Hiro runs off, leaving the guy marked for death totally alone and not waiting until someone else shows up to change guard. In his quest to... I don't know anymore. He finds a man covered in blood with his eyes sewn open and a message scrawled into the wall in his blood. He's still alive for about 15 whole seconds before a statue of justice collapses next to him, prompted by nothing, and Final Destination's his ass. The whole message, confess your sins or die, is carved into his back. We return to Kazu with the whole Scooby Gang, and surprise, surprise, he's dead. Who could have guessed that leaving someone totally alone in this death game where he had been marked for death would have killed him to death? We recover the cell phone, and sure enough, someone was holding his mother hostage and killed himself to protect her. We find the phone, explain the phone, and Ryuhei continues to be cartoonishly unlikable and stupid by calling Kazu a coward for killing himself and brandishing the gun he has for literally no reason that makes any sense. Why the fuck would you tell people you have that? It's such a powerful bargaining chip to use only in dire situations if you're gonna use it at all. Why the hell would you just announce to the whole fucking world that you have a whole ass-loaded gun? Fuck. The Hayato continues to be brain dead and surmises that the man with his eyes sewn open and the words carved into his back might be the mastermind, which is par for the fucking course in this stupid book. There's a memory card in the guy's ID, which, what a shitty place to put that clue, could have been easily overlooked. In fact, it almost was. The raw convenience of it is the only reason we found it, and I'm fucking tired. We get another terrible page layout when we finally find the entrance. This fucking layout is blocked so goddamn badly. From the way this is read, it's meant to imply that Ryuhei kicks the door, I think. Why do we only see his foot slightly raised at the end of the kick? We don't see him wind up, we don't see an impact, nothing. We see Asami flinch, I guess, at the impact. We also see it's a fucking double-bolted shut right next to it, so why the fuck would you kick it? This page reads so fucking badly. I hate this manga. We find yet another Five Nights at Freddy's security room, and Hayato decides to stay behind on cams until the next judge, with Hiro, Ryuhei, and Asami staying with him, and the other two separating, which is... God, I can't keep bitching about this. I'll save it for the wrap-up. Hayato opines about the fact that there was a statue of Themis, also known as Justice, here, and... Okay, listen. I can't get too in the weeds about all the terrible dialogue in these books because, quite frankly, I'd be repeating myself a lot. It's why I'm skimming over a lot of it. Nobody in these stories talks like normal human beings. Everyone is such a trope I could play bingo with these characters and get blackouts every chapter, but like, Asami asks if Hayato intends to go into law because he says his whole family is involved in the court system. He gives a non-committal response, and Ryuhei says, quote, "All you did there was use the smarts you already had to make yourself look intelligent." What? This is such a fucking nitpick. You don't have to say anything. I know that, but like, yeah, that's how being intelligent works. If you're intelligent, you use the smarts you already have. What does that sentence even mean? Is intelligence only when you get new information then? What? It's so stilted and ridiculous. I don't even have words. Fucking Christ. Turns out that the monitors are showing a totally different game with totally different players in a totally different place. Asami huffs fucking dust off again and says, well, it's probably CGI that's running in real time and is literally exactly the situation on monitors you might have found for what purpose? She says this to scare them, but like, yeah, it'd be pretty scary to see more people going through the same situation you're in right now. Fuck, whatever. Hiro leaves to go off on his own and finds Miku just devouring all the food. What was her sin again? I have a bad fucking feeling about this. Hiro helps her avoid being suspicious and catches Ryuhei about to rape Rina at fucking gunpoint because he's a fucking caricature who would have been the first to go in literally any other situation that made sense. Asami proves she's not a girl's girl and stops Hiro from saving her so that she can conveniently monologue about how Ryuhei was from some indie band that broke up after he kicked the shit out of a bandmate and did heroin about it. It isn't until Rina has her fucking top ripped off that Asami decides, oh shit, maybe I should intervene. Gives Ryuhei a terribly choreographed slap. It's voting time again! And the only thing that makes literally any sense is to kill the psychopathic violent rapist with the gun, but we have to pretend that there's some tension in this scene. What do you mean there's a tie? Oh my fucking god, why? Why? Ryuhei's been nothing but a violent, manipulative cartoon villain this entire time. There's literally no reason the vote shouldn't be fucking unanimous. There's no reason for literally a single person in this room to vote for Hiro. This is ridiculous. A fucking clown show. You have to be fucking... Okay. I'm calm. So the two people still alive have to fight to the death because of course it would be that easy, dipshits. I'd imagine this person thought out ties in advance. So surprise, the rageaholic has the fucking upper hand and starts kicking the shit out of Hiro until he whips out the gun and it fucking explodes? I think? I don't know how you look at these pages and tell me what you think fucking happened in the comments. Hiro makes the worst choice known to man and decides to save him because what else is the protagonist in one of these stories going to do? Let the actual monster die? God for fucking bid. Hayato says he saved him for his own benefit, which just paints a bigger target on his back. Good going, shooter. Rina gets tased and framed for Yuhei's murder because not a single sad sack in the book ever thinks being alone is a bad idea. Asami changes personality again and decides that killing him wasn't a good idea, like she didn't explain that she hated him 2 chapters ago and thought that they should let him die mere moments ago, and gets confrontational with Rina because cat fight, I guess, and are you kidding me? What is this? Finally a direct action shot, and literally everything about this composition is wrong. Asami hits Rina across the right side of her face, but her body is falling to the right. If you hit someone across the face, the momentum carries them in the direction of the follow-through, so she should be reacting bodily to the left. The impact effect is also in the middle of her chest, not up by her face, so it looks like she got slapped across the titties, not the face. I also had to double-check the page before to confirm that Asami did in fact backhand her for whatever reason. Also, the following panels are so fucking bad to read the action. Panel flow is horrendous because she's facing the wrong direction and shatters the 180 rule, both in the panel following the slap and the one beneath it. Rina's head in the last panel is tilted forward, despite it being tilted back in the panel before, and despite being shorter than Asami, being pulled up, Asami's standing underneath her and holding her over her? What the fuck? Finally, on the very next page, Asami has Rina pinned up against one of the desks, I think, despite there being nothing behind her in the panel before, and that other desk disappearing in the panel after. Like I said, the artwork in general is stiff and badly put together, but certain scenes in this become unintelligible. The amount of times I have to reread pages to figure out what the fuck is going on is staggering. Back on track. Hayato reappears and blames Hiro because, yeah, he has the most to gain from killing Ryuhei. Fucker, you said to let him die. What does that matter? We check the memory card and it has pictures of everyone on it. The ones labeled for Miku show a fat girl, and nobody puts 2 and 2 together because they're brain dead, so Miku shows up and swipes the phone. Naturally, we find out that the girl, assigned with gluttony, has body dysmorphia, and I get fucking irate. She smashes the phone, and sure enough, the people dying in the other room are revealed to be people the players know. It's voting time again, and surprise, Miku holds Rina at glass point? I don't know what you'd call that. From when... You know what? Never mind. I'm just surprised it took this long. Hiro continues to be a coward and doesn't vote, so now the girls fight, and Miku stabs Asami in the throat with her glasses, which is pretty sick, actually. I can't lie. Yeah, now we go free, right? What do you mean there's 7 more chapters? Oh, fucking Christ. And the twist is that when the plushie said 4 survivors, they were counting the other team too, so it's still fucking going. Miku gets headshot by Hayato's dad with a crossbow, and Hayato gets... He says he got my arm, but... When? With what? Fucking look at this. He never gets hit with anything. I thought that he was lying about this for the longest time, but we see the blood later. We separate again because nobody learns, and we meet up with Hikaru, who calls Hiro by his brother's name, which could mean anything at this fucking point. We have a brief scuffle, and Hayato's murder-horny dad explains that their side was the ones being punished. Therefore, the other side had the connection. Hiro and Hayato team up in another bad action scene, and then our exposition murderer dies. Except, no he didn't. They separate again to find keys to the mask. Hayato villain monologues and then gets stabbed with the bolt by his not-dead dad. Dad proceeds to then threaten Hikari and Hiro, despite the fact that the old windbag could be hit with 1 chair and die. Dad then has a Jimmy Neutron brain blast and figures out the twist. Hiro was the villain all along. Okay, here's the lowdown. Apparently, Group B was all people who accepted bribes and facilitated the plea bargain for the guy who hit Hiro's brother at the beginning of the story. Group A was their kids who were being punished because Group B used their bribe money on them. I'll yell about that in a second. Let's get through this. Rina and her mom get out because her mom never accepted the bribe. Hikari poisons Hiro because she found out his little stunt was why the brother was even there. We roll credits. Fuck!
I'm going to ultra kill you!
Oh my god, how the fuck is the second one worse? The biggest and most obvious problem is that the whole cast has a fucking self-preservation and intelligence of Paint Huffers Anonymous. Characters jump to the dumbest possible leaps, make the worst possible decisions at every given opportunity. Ryuhei, for example, would have been the first motherfucker to die in any group that had any common sense. If we're in a situation where we have to kill someone and a guy is actively violent and threatening rape and murder for kicks, he's gone! Hayato and Asami teaming up with him is literally insane, especially because the moment he's killed off by the majority, they're fucked. You sided with and facilitated this shit. You're the weakest link. Goodbye. Hayato also paints a massive fucking target on his back by constantly light Yagami-style villain monologuing all the time. He's just actively a sociopath, talking about how he's going to survive at any cost. Goodbye. You're voted off the fucking island. These kinds of stories constantly neglect the fact that these situations are also social games. You have to at least pretend to be amicable, because if you don't, you're the first one to go. In this story, everyone is openly awful, meaning that there's literally no reason to ever listen to them ever. They're constantly splitting up in situations where people are literally dying all around them, at literally every opportunity where it would make literally no sense to. They're just wandering around the courthouse, totally alone, with fucking murderers on the loose. This stupid fucking twist is only facilitated by the fact that everyone is always alone at all times. Speaking of that fucking twist, let's run that back. Okay, we'll start with the same gaping plot hole that the last twist had. Where the fuck are these two getting all of this? These two fucking kids are high schoolers. Where did you get all this stupid engineering bullshit to make this? Where did you find an abandoned courthouse? Where'd you get the cameras? How did you set up the cameras? The crossbows, the axes, and the biggest one, the gun. Listen, this is going to be a nitpick and a side tangent, but hear me out, because this is the perfect example of how this story is constructed in a way that doesn't make any sense when looked at with the naked eye. There's dozens of steps to own a gun in Japan. You need a license to own gunpowder by itself, for example. This isn't the US where you can drive down to Walmart and leave with a rifle before your fucking lunch break is over. That little handgun takes months for an adult to acquire who fills out paperwork and has several legal bodies sign off on it. The alternative is doing business with organized crime. So you expect me to believe that not only did these children either lie to several government authorities or buy it from the fucking Yakuza, but also that they know enough about guns to make it explode on firing? So for those of you in the audience who aren't gun people, that explosion, that shit took effort. So that's a revolver. I don't know enough autism points in that particular tech tree to know what kind, and if you do, let me know in the comments, but I think it's a 38 special. One of the things that revolvers are known for is that they, quote, never jam. Well, they do, but they have much simpler fixes to mechanical failure. So, surprise, these things are intentionally designed not to kill the people firing them. I can suspend my disbelief a little bit, but this is nuts. All of these dominoes together, I just can't buy that. Now we can talk about how fucking stupid the motivation is. Let's pretend for a minute that Group A doesn't exist. Punishing Group B in this fucking Danganronpa-style kangaroo court doesn't really make any sense in this context, even if it was plausible to find all this shit. Also, if Rina's mom never accepted the money, why is she here? To be the winner? What does that matter if you were to kill everyone anyway? Why not just rig the exit door to a car battery, call it a fucking day? Framing it as a game doesn't make any sense. When you add Group A into the mix, why? The metaphor doesn't even make any sense. Half these people cared so little about human life that they traded it for cash. The other half are selfish dicks, but you already knew that. They let your brother's killer get away scot-free. The whole thing about them deserving it is that they had the money used on them, but that only extends to culpability if they knew where the money came from, which you can't know. Killing the other kids does nothing, fixes nothing, and actually makes you two worse because you're now doing the same thing that happened to your brother, killing innocent people. On top of everything, why assign the sins in the first place? They were totally superfluous to literally anything. You knew what their sin was. It was greed! All of them were greedy! That's what it all boils down to! This weird subterfuge, this fucking overall thinly veiled seven deadly things thing, it makes no sense! Completely stupid! This whole fucking series sucks ass, and I'm so glad there's only one left! We have to talk about the final series in the Doubt trilogy. Let's talk about Secret.
Let's do the child one.
We cold open this one in medias res with Mitomo telling his class of kids that there's 3 murderers amongst a group of 6, which is... Alright. The exposition is stilted as a circus performance. These kids are the only survivors of a bus accident and an ensuing suicide, and their teacher knows 3 of them are murderers. He's, for some reason, going to wait a week to let them get away with it and kill him. This is the weakest fucking start yet. No pretense, no attachment to the characters. We're tossed right in and have both ankles broken in the fall. After a flashback that should have been our opening, a conveniently placed news crew lets us know that the eye patch girl, Mika, is a former idol. Mitomo cares about the kids, and the journos suck. Sanada goes home and makes a comment about killing again with a rabbit head in the background, like his massive fucking fursuit head is totally normal room decor. Pause for a second. Listen, I know we've just started. I don't want to hope that this is a red herring, but I want to take a second to talk about how much I fucking hate this kind of red herring. There's nothing that makes me discount a moment in a story like this more than when someone has an, oh god, there I go, killing again, bit right at the beginning of the story. You're a moron. I'm not. There's no fucking suspense to this. Of course it's either not him, or he's not talking about that, or what the hell ever. Shut up. Stop it. I'm not done. We get another flashback, and I want to start making note of these changes, so I'm going to start saying names at you real fast. Ozu and Amanai switch with Kisaragi and Sato because Amanai gets car sick, which, same. Dramamine buddies. Futami, the guy who killed himself, was supposed to be there, but he got sick. The bus driver was dead at the wheel when the bus crashed. In reality, Ozu and Amanai have a conversation, and Ozu remembers someone standing after the crash with blood on his hands. Amanai suggests murder. I propose that's stupid, because you were in a fucking bloody bus accident. Ozu was running around with blood on his own hands because he was injured. Someone just standing, horrified, while surrounded by the corpses of their classmates was pretty fucking normal, I think. Maybe he was trying to help somebody else. Maybe he was injured. Maybe it was the blood of the person next to him. If you're in a bus crash so violent it kills 95% of the people in said bus, I think someone standing around with bloody fingers is a pretty goddamn normal thing, and natural, I'd think. Sure enough, the next day, Ozu's fucking got with a message that says, "I know your sins," written on the blackboard in his blood. They debate about what the message means, like it can't mean literally only one thing, namely that the killer knows what happened, and Shima, the fat kid, accuses the main character, because that's how these social deduction manga go. The main character has to get accused of murder at some point. Turns out Ozu isn't fucking dead, despite all the blood needed to write the message. Hooray? His assailant gets a text saying to kill Mitomo or the sender will rat. I want to give props about hiding the assailant's identity, but Tonagai's characters look all the fucking same, so it's not exactly hard. The rabbit head is donned, and they beat the shit out of Sonata, thinking it's Mitomo, because of fucking course it wasn't Sonata. Anyone with half a brain cell could have told you that. It was Shima! Of course! He took advantage of the crash to kill the bully who was talking about raping his crush, I think? Because naturally that's the kind of shit we do in this kind of series. Shima feels guilt for actually considering going along with the offer and kills himself by yeeting himself off the roof. We get a short flashback about Futami feeling survivor's guilt for not being there that day. Futami asks Sonata if he'd seen Tono, the glasses girl who was going to get assaulted. And we get the most suspicious panel ever before we're now 2 flashbacks deep. Turns out Futami was dating her in secret and threw himself off the roof that day. When brought back to the present, we're shown that Shima somehow didn't die and... God damn it, it's bad conveyance o'clock again. In the bit we see of him jumping off the roof, he doesn't fall off. He jumps. He clears like a foot, before presumably plummeting to the ground. When Sonata looks over, he's on a metal awning that supposedly caught him, but there's no way. The way this is drawn, his head or leg might have caught it on the way down, but there's no way he landed well enough that he doesn't break a bone and then the concrete. This is ridiculous. It also adds to how weirdly bloodless and defanged these stupid manga are. I don't get why you'd keep him alive if we immediately see him being shipped off anyway, but whatever, never mind. Actually, rewind the fucking tape. This is the body we see attacking Sonata. That's not Shima. God damn it, I hate this stupid shit. Why make it the one person you've drawn with a different body type if you're just gonna change that body type and lie to your audience to make it a secret? Fucking, god damn it, I hate this stupid garbage. Turns out the cops aren't arresting him for kicking the shit out of Ozu, but for killing the bully after the accident. Look, do I believe that the police could have figured it out? Sure, I'd buy that. The thing that I'm struggling with is, why would they? The kid died from blunt force trauma that came from a piece of rubble found at the scene. It's a reach, that's all I'd say, especially given the fact that it's probably all destroyed in the fucking violent bus explosion, but... Mitomo shows up, monologues about how he'd hoped Shima would have died because he'll probably get away with it, and that he'd pushed him to do it. I'm gonna go with the obvious question of how the fuck did he know that Shima did it in the first place, because he wasn't there, but that's going in the back pocket for what I'm sure is a stupid twist at the end. The Breakfast Club reconvenes and shares info with nobody wanting to go visit the friend who had the shit kicked out of him for fear of... what, exactly? They all mention, like, oh, someone who hurt him could be there. Yeah, someone who hurt him is in the room with you right the fuck now, actually, and you all showed up here. Wouldn't it be better for you to all travel in groups for the foreseeable future? Shouldn't you go together to make sure they don't try to kill your friend again? I don't know what it is with Tonagai and his characters huffing fucking paint. I swear to God. Sonata visits Ozu and ends up telling us that he killed Tono because she asked him to. Was anyone surprised? I know I wasn't. Turns out he was being weird around his friend because he felt bad and couldn't tell him he'd killed his girlfriend. Womp womp, who cares? Amano's brother shows up and tells us that the meds and hospital supplies were stolen recently, which could mean nothing, and Ozu pulls 2 and 2 together and that Amano could have drugged the bus driver. Why would Amano have done this? Mitomo approaches our one-eyed model Mono to tell her the same shit we already knew. She bumps into Ozu making a call so that she can learn the rest, making the chapter 9 of the 17-chapter manga literally pointless, except for maybe another scene of Mitomo monologuing, which adds nothing. We find Futami's suicide note, meaning that the line could be a total dead end. But Sanada counts himself among the murderers, notably, which feels wild to me at this point, so it could have been anything. We knew it was a mercy killing, and while I think it could be interesting to explore that, Tonagai made it literally impossible for there to be moral grade in this situation. Either she was going to bleed out or burn to death, and the latter sounded like it'd suck shit, so she asked for the easier one. There's no implication of a reason that would have counted amongst a retaliatory killing, and presumably the plotless mass killing. It's sort of a weird bullshit thing that doesn't... Good fucking god, never mind. So after a visit to Tono's dad and the discovery of her diary, we find out she was pregnant, which implies that Sanada killed the baby. This is so fucking needlessly melodramatic, and still doesn't make him a murderer. There's literally nothing to gain from this other than being the reason that Futami couldn't have killed himself, when we could have just pulled a Dear Evan Hansen and had a cool reveal of somebody being caught in a lie later. We didn't need to kill a teenage mom for that, and adding the note meant nothing because it was just disproven a chapter later. This was fluff, good fucking grief. Turns out it was Kunikita, the dark-haired girl who wasn't relevant until now, who did it. She had a crush on him, they had a terribly illustrated fight, which... Look at it, we're par for the course. I don't have time to break down how stiff and weird the poses are. We're almost at the finish line. The art's bad. Moving on. He ate shit on accident, and she didn't technically kill him at all. So, here we are. It's chapter 13 of 17. Something isn't adding up. One kid killed a bully that was threatening an assault on his classmate. One kid mercy killed a girl who was going to burn to death. And one was a fucking accident. Where do we go from there? Well, I think I figured out the stupid fucking twist as of now, but since you're watching this video, there's no way to convince you that, as I was reading this stupid thing, so I know exactly where it was going. I'm trusting you can put two and two together, but we'll keep scooting through. Mitomo isn't there on the day of the deadline, and neither are Kono or Amino. Sanada gets a voicemail on his way to save the day, as he almost gets isekai'd, which would have been hilarious this far in, I'm gonna be real. We save Kono, who claims Amino attacked her, and we go get him. Gotta go get him. I do think it's hilarious that Sanada tries to pull the girl who lost an eye in a violent bus crash that killed her friends onto another bus, but that's a weird digression. Bullshit happens and Kono knocks out Sanada because if you can trust Tonagai to do anything, it's make his women villains. She loses her fucking mind and rightfully Amino calls her out for being a freak when literally people died. She made a comment earlier about Sanada killing his mother, and that's resolved by her having died in childbirth. And listen, you know what's killing me at this point? This stupid fucking plot thread. It's fucking crazy for every circumstance to be an accident to the point that this manga doesn't end with all of it being a lie, and Sanada is the actual serial killer. I'll become one. We finally discover that the sleeping pills were a red herring all along. Turns out Mitomo was Tono's older brother, and since he was bitter about her dying in the accident and letting the kids survive, he just fucking pitted them all against each other in hopes that the group of random children would resort to murder. I'm gonna hold it in. Chapter left. I'm gonna hold it in. Turns out that his knowledge of what happened with Shima and Kunikita was literally nothing but hyper-accurate guesses, which... I'm holding it in. Also, Mitomo meet up at the site of the accident. It turns out there was no third murderer. Mitomo set it up for Kono to be it from the beginning. So I'm holding it in. It turns out he was an incest ciscon freak this whole time, and... I'm holding it in. Sanada was alive the whole time. This was one elaborate setup to... You've gotta be fucking kidding me.
No! It's just dumb.
This is the worst fucking ending yet. Let's talk about the profound stupidity of the whole charade. This fucking psych major with a ciscon streak decided that he was going to emotionally manipulate the group of traumatized children into killing each other death game style with the promise that he was going to out who committed the fucking murder. Okay, let's ignore the fact that with literally one conversation, whole thing falls the fuck apart, and instead focus on how there's no way he could have constructed it in the fucking first place. The whole story goes out of its way to drop 10 fucking pound frames on our main character for being a murderer, and keeps trying to assure us that he is one for no real reason, when there's literally no way that anyone could have fucking known it. In fact, there's no way that he could have known that any of the murders happened. The reason that Shima gave him when bringing up his bully could have been a fucking trauma response, but he magically knows that it means he committed murder. Why? How? Who fucking knows? How the fuck did he know that? How the fuck did he intuit that? Also, he says that the cops showed up because of the forensic evidence that Shima killed the bully. But who told them it was Shima? The fucking bus blew up. What forensic evidence? Even if you had convinced the cops that it was a murder, how could you have known it was Shima? With what prints? Also, provided all of that was true, say I bought all of that, who called the fucking cops and told them that Shima was at the school? Couldn't have been Mitomo, since he said he wanted him dead, so why would he have called the cops? And it couldn't have been Sanada either, because he didn't know why Shima was getting arrested. Fucking Kunikita doesn't make sense either. He says that, oh, if they check the fingerprints on the bookmarks, they'd know. But how did you know? Nobody was up on the roof. He could have been holding out the bookmark since he got it from his girlfriend. You have no fucking idea that that meant that she murdered him. Well, he knew because he grilled them and they said. No, he says himself they were educated guesses, that he was shooting in the fucking dark off of nothing. What a wild fucking guess that turned out to be right the whole time. I'm also gonna ask the million-dollar question. Why not just kill them yourself? He goes to all of this trouble to line it all up on Kono, when in reality, it would have been easier to just fucking kill the other kids his damn self, frame her later, and move the fuck on. This fucking killing game charade makes no sense. You're assuming that a group of children just jump to murder the first chance you get. You're a moron. This whole plan is stupid, and the proof is that not a single fucking one of them died. It was a total failure. It's almost like high schoolers aren't typically adept at murder, and you should have just done it from the fucking start. The twist ending, like all of them, also fucking sucks. The inclusion of sibling rape added absolutely nothing at all, by the way. In fact, it actively detracts from a genuinely good motive. Mitomo could have been a way more compelling villain if it had been a resentment that motivated him. We already had a through line of survivor's guilt, which was actually a little bit interesting, so I don't know why we didn't capitalize on that, and instead, what we got was, my father said I couldn't assault her, and that's your fault moment. Shut up. Pound sand. Gross. This one was, overall, I think, the worst written. The pacing in these drag like your mom's titties, and I know I keep saying it, but this is the worst. It feels like nothing but wheel spinning and reaction shots meant to keep things moving if for only a chapter longer to make sure there's enough for a full volume. It doesn't feel like twists and turns. It feels like dead end after dead end. I ordered a mystery and now I have mercury poisoning from all the red herring you keep feeding me. You'll be hearing from my attorney. I read 2 interviews with Tonagai, both in French because apparently his stories are weirdly popular in France, and gained a bit of interesting insight. He was asked by 2 publications to talk during Japan Expo 11 and 12. In those interviews, he talks about influences relating to Judge being Saw, scans, that he wanted to understand writers like Togashi, same, and that he's deeply honored that the French audience seems to really like his work. For as harsh as I am on the story, for as bad as I think it is, for as terrible of an artist I think he might have been, I'm kind of glad I sought these reviews out, if I'm being honest. It affirms to me that even if the stories he makes are bad beyond belief, he's a guy. I feel the need, especially in times like this, to just lean on the fact that the story is bad, the writing is bad, but Tonagai is a dude. He's a dude making serialized manga and working his ass off, doing his best to make something that, even if it isn't good, helped make his dreams come true. I'm not going to be less harsh. I'm not going to tone down how I feel about these things. But I felt like it was important, at the end of talking about all of this, as mad and as hyperbolic as I got, to point out that Tonagai isn't a bad person. He's mishandled some themes, he fucked some shit up, he did some shit that I wouldn't have done. But unlike people like Urban Spook, Tonagai's not a bad dude. And I don't want it to come across, despite how angry this video was, like I think that he's a bad dude. I realized about halfway through it that it could have come across that way, and that's why I wanted to seek out some things. If the vibes I'd gotten were wrong, or if I was just getting hyperbolic and weird for no reason. And I kind of was. The story's bad, yeah, but he's a dude. Don't hate the guy, hate the story. Now, I've said all this, and you may be wondering why I went on, Jesus Christ, a lot of your hard-earned time, to complain about something that sucks from half a decade ago that nobody read by an author none of you have heard of, who I went out of my way to stress is just a normal dude when I could be making the fucking mouthwashing video. It's a remarkably simple answer. Because I'm tired of what manga like these represent, not what they are. Those of you who aren't deep in the horror manga paint like me won't know how pervasive the issues that I talk about in these stories are. How often I see people online recommending something they promise is the Cadillac of the genre, only for me to open the garage and find a fucking windowless van hastily painted any color but white. There's more profoundly offensive things in the market right now, but I didn't want to give them my oxygen, mostly because it'd be the Urban Spook video all over again. I don't want to keep kicking the same horse and treading the same circles over and over. I want to talk about things that are good or bad in interesting ways, and the thing about this one is that it's interesting and so tremendously bad in every way, but he's been published 3 times. In an industry where published work is getting grueling and painful, this nonsense keeps getting page time, and he keeps going. I'm tired of reading this kind of shit for it to be acceptable to the audiences, but it's admittedly kind of admirable that for this kind of shit there's still a market. And cool, I guess. I don't know. Also, I read Doubt when it was first published in English, and have hated it the whole time. I picked up Judge afterwards because I wanted to believe that he'd improved, and I felt he'd gotten worse. That's right. I read the first series a decade ago, when it first came out in English. It's been a personal bugbear of mine for 10 years. I've been bitching and complaining about this dog shit ever since, and my friends have grabbed me by the shoulders and told me to write it all down, so I did. All of you have facilitated a place where I can scream into the void and have thousands of eyes and ears listen to me before screaming back. That means a lot. And I realized at the end of this, as I had done this, that maybe in that way, it's relatable content, me and Tona Guy. Some people might think that this video is bad. You might not. You might think it was really good. But we're in the same place, making shit, throwing it out into the void, and having people call back. And I think maybe that's kind of the point, you know? That even if something's bad, it'll find an audience, and people will enjoy it, and it'll keep going. And I'm kind of happy, honestly, that a normal dude is able to make and publish bad work, because it means over time he can get more criticism, more critique, he can become better. And I want to see Tona Guy get better. I want to see him make better work over time. But this has been a bugbear of mine, because it's just something that rattles around in my dome a bunch. I don't know, maybe this rambling at the end doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and maybe it seems like I'm coming at a weird place when I've been so angry this whole time, but I don't know. I try to have some kind of introspection at the ends of these things, and I felt like this was the time for it. It was the place. I don't know. This got weird at the end. Whatever. I think for now I have to go and start writing the next tirade, and maybe next time it'll be something that's a little more interesting? Who knows? For now, go out, find something bad and enjoy it. Because I know that through making this video, I found a way to finally enjoy these stories. Have a good one.
Flux and Slaughter, because this video is bad, if not worse. Yeah, I don't have ad blocker for YouTube. Shut up.
In one of my favorite manga of all time, Gimmick, a conversation gets had that I think about a lot. The main character, Kohei Nagase, is a VFX artist trying to stop a series of bombings by another artist that had been scorned for his monsters being just gross. It goes like this. Whoever made these didn't know what he was doing. The dummies aren't scary, they're disgusting. Fear and revulsion aren't the same thing. Only a hack would confuse the two. That's something I've tried to keep in mind while working on my own horror projects over the years. Is what I'm making scary, or is it just gross? It's helped keep me in line while writing things like CSA, body horror, child death, all sorts of twisted and horrible things. Am I making this scary, or am I relying on the revulsion to do the work for me? Well, I can tell you which one Urban Spook is doing, that's for sure. Hello there, my lovely Legionnaires. It's time for me to use my commentary muscles to talk about something that grates on me regularly. Ethics and horror! Hooray! This is gonna be a long-ass video, and I'm not gonna be nice for, well, a variety of reasons. We're matching energy today, my lovely Legionnaires. Those of you who are looking at the title and going, Hiten, what the hell is Urban Spook? I'll give you a quick rundown. Urban Spook is, allegedly, an analog horror series made by the creator Urban Slug. It's about two serial killers who brutally slaughter innocent people, then paint their bodies. That's about it. That's all we've got after 8 episodes out of 10. Poggers, love that for us. We'll start this video proper with a story summary to make sure that my lovely Legionnaires will be able to keep up without having to give Urban Spook a view. And that's gonna go by quick, because all this series really boils down to is purple prose soaked in corn syrup and red dye 40. Yeah, that's it. By the way, real quick, if our lovely editor could put some content warnings up on screen here. Actually, if you want to skip the story summary, can we get a timestamp here too? I'd appreciate that immensely. Just the content warnings and the timestamp. I want to give you some time to soak that in, given the X amount of minutes that you will be watching this video. Yeah. Are we ready? Let's go!
We're cops! We're cops! We're cops! We're cops!
Okay, episode 1, Faces. 6 months ago, cops in City find 3 paintings after 3 murders. Yeah, we never get a name for where the place is, so I guess we're just in the fucking back rooms, I guess. Carla Gray is stabbed 36 times and has all of her teeth pulled out. Jackie Graham is drowned and stabbed 27 times in the taint. James Miller gets his face torn off and his wrists cut. Supposedly he lived for a few days without a face, which... sure, I guess. 2 months later, they find a bunch more paintings. You don't need to give a shit about these right now, and quite frankly, I don't know why we should, since we don't see most of these victims later anyway, and front-loading all of this was stupid. Oh, sorry, I'm doing it again. I'm jumping the gun. Yeah, we find a self-portrait of the painters. 4 weeks ago, from 4 weeks ago, from 6 months ago, we get our next murders. The officer who found the paintings, Bill Collins, and his whole family disappear. 2-month-old Angel Collins is hanged from the ceiling.
She does it for the whole
Great.
video.
A random teenage kid named Daniel Williams is burned to death. A random woman named Jennifer White and her daughter Lisa are just dead. Kind of shocked he didn't go for them ripped in half by a taffy puller or what the hell ever, but I'll take it, I guess. And finally, the Collins family are given amphetamine and then liquefied. They don't explain how, just they're a fine meat slurry now. There's another picture of the killer, whatever. Episode 3 in the walls.
You have just made your last mistake.
Oh, God!
10 days ago, from 4 weeks ago, from 2 months later, from 6 months ago, the Beck twins, Corey and Margaret, both 11, remember that, go missing. 5 days later, from 10 days ago, from 4 weeks ago, from 2 months later, from 6 months ago, their bodies are found. They are cut in half, sewn together at the waist, Margaret on top, Corey on the bottom. Margaret died from a brick with the word meat written on it being shoved into her mouth so hard it broke her neck. Corey had his dick ripped off. Oh, yeah. Painting was titled that, huh? Say, how old were they again? 11? Dope. Moving on. I guess Corey caught a picture of the killer 1 week before 10 days ago, from 4 weeks ago, from 2 months later, from 6 months ago. That might have been why. I don't know. Episode 4, The Clue. At some undisclosed time after 10 days ago, from 4 weeks ago, from 2 months later, from 6 months ago, Tom Harris is found suffocated after being totally encased in candle wax after the killers climbed up a drain pipe into his third-floor apartment with his eyelids and arms removed and a third mystery arm encased with him. Alright, then 1 week after some undisclosed time, after 10 days ago, from 4 weeks ago, from 2 months later, from 6 months ago, the investigator who found Tom, Sean Kane, goes missing, and an undetermined time after that, the body is found inside his home. His dog's legs had all been broken because, God forbid, we have any decency after the CSA, but the dog is alive, which is refreshing. This pattern will not continue. Wonder where that restraint went. Sean wrote number 2 in his own blood. The camera caught the killer, given his painting's title. He's probably soup. I don't know. Episode 5, The Witness. 3 days ago, from 1 week after some undisclosed time, after 10 days ago, from 4 weeks ago, from 2 months later, from 6 months ago, Tina Rosenberg, Flora Rosenberg, and Jack Stryker are reported missing. 1 day after, 3 days ago, from 1 week after some undisclosed time, after 10 days ago, from 4...
Insomniac. Hiten ended up with the allegations because she is very quick to anger, and she lashed out at numerous people previously. So she just doesn't seem like it here because this isn't a commentary video or a video about the community. But yeah, Hiten was a D1 crash out.
4 weeks ago, from 2 months later, from 6 months ago, police find Jack's car and the bodies. Tina is somehow still alive, despite her feet being removed and her arms tied to a tree. Flora's head is caved in with a sledgehammer, and Jack is also voided like Sean because Slug ran out of ideas. We get a police sketch of the killer, episode 6, Pigs. Okay. We ready? Here's where shit hits the fan. Recently, from 1 day after, 3 days ago, from 1 week after, some undisclosed time after 10 days ago, from 4 weeks ago, from 2 months later, from 6 months ago, former officer Ian Ford and his wife May go missing and their bodies are then found in their barn. May has been handcuffed to a pole and raped to death by a horse, the struggle of which resulted in her tearing her own hands off. Fucking okay. God damn it, the horse died from a Viagra-induced heart attack, because why not? Fiona, the Ford's granddaughter that is introduced into this scene as abruptly as I've written it in the script, was found decapitated in a blanket next to a bloody mattress covered in Viagra. Fuck, god damn it, her eyes are removed. We don't want to think about it, never mind. We just keep going. The faces of previous victims are found nailed to a wall. Several pigs are decapitated. Ian Ford is found stuffed into the guts of one of the pigs whose eyes have been replaced with Fiona's. Sure, fine. They find a back room with the rest of Fiona's body, several more paintings that'll be relevant later, and a tape with the killer doing the spooky face. Episode 7, Family. God fucking damn it, son of a bitch, how does it get worse? Over the past few days, after an indeterminate time, recently after 1 day, there are more gruesome murder reports. Who could have possibly guessed? In a random house, Janice's last name has her fetus cut out of her and is then strangled to...
Yeah, let me pause this right quick. If this will load anytime soon. Shiten Mitsuru. Playlists. Where are the playlists? Yeah, but yeah, she did one actually. Hiten Mitsuru, re-uploads. I recommend for Insomniac. I recommend these two. These are her 2 videos on Fran for her ultimate crash outs. And in this one right here, Fran is a child, and she calls Fran's mouth a dong slobber. So yeah, she sexualized a child. in this one. But yeah, I definitely recommend the two Fran videos to see Hiten crash out, and I recommend her Tippy and Keyblade video, her Junkie video, and her Spocter video. These three also.
To death with her own umbilical cord. Her husband Paul has his mouth sewn shut after being tied to the kitchen counter and was killed by having the baby's head stuffed down his throat. The baby is cut into pieces and scattered all over for... Zeke is missing, so I'm sure we'll find him brutally violated at some point. They find a random painting. Isabel Jackson, the person who called the cops and led them to that house instead of her own for whatever motherfucking reason, has a hole drilled into her head. Her husband is stabbed 7 times and decapitated. A weird riddle is put in Isabel's new head hole. Footprints are found. Episode 8, Meet, the most current video as of scripting. Over the past week, after an unspecified amount of time, over the past few days, an indeterminate time, after recently, after 1 day, after 3 days ago, from 1 week, after some undisclosed time, after 10 days ago, from 4 weeks ago, from 2 months later, from 6 months ago, more people are dead. Shocker!
You can't escape me!
Dr. Fred Baker has had the skid on his head sandpapered off, his cat is missing, but given that this is the painting of the cat and more Viagra was found, put 2 and 2 together. You're smart. 2 days into, over the past week, after an unspecified amount of time, after the past few days, an indeterminate time, after recently, after 1 day, after 3 days ago, from 1 week after some undisclosed time, after 10 days ago, from 4 weeks ago, from 2 months later, from 6 months ago, George White is found missing a face and stabbed 487 times, mostly in the neck and dick. 4 of said time after the past few days, an indiscriminate amount of time, after recently, after 1 day, after 3 days ago, from 1 week after some undisclosed time, 10 days after... Fuck. Sarah Stone and her husband Michael are kidnapped, and we see the criminals on their camera. Woo! That's it. There's your summary. I skipped a few things that quite frankly don't fucking matter, so you've missed nothing. We're all on the same page. Let's get into the critique. God fucking damn it. Open the floor with the first thing you see at the opening of every single one of these videos, the dog water content warnings. For those of you who follow me on Twitch, I make it a point to highlight these nothing burger content warnings because they don't fucking do anything. Look at these. All 8 of these. These are ass. They don't warn you of shit. Graphic, disturbing, violent, distressing. These words could be anything from an on-screen stabbing to just showing us hardcore, hurtcore content. These are empty fucking platitudes. Of course a horror story about a serial killer is going to be graphic, disturbing, violent, or distressing. Are you some kind of fucking idiot? For fuck's sake. In the Walls, the episode where a child has their dick ripped off does not have a content warning. Here, let me just... There! They should look like this. This way, your audience can have informed consent to your content. The ones you had are lazy excuses to say that you had them and claim you did your due diligence. Listen, you can say whatever you want about the shit in Boyfriend to Death, for example. At least their fucking content warnings are exhaustive and on the download page, so you have to see them in order to get the game. Visually, they're all inconsistent too, which, considering the premise that these are all tapes made by presumably the same person, wouldn't they be more uniform? I corrected that also. By the way, none of these fucking videos are age restricted. No, you know what? I take that back. Episode 5 is age restricted, but not the one where the child has their dick ripped off, or the ones with the bestiality and necrophilia content. No, those ones aren't age restricted. All of the others are, though. Or just 5 is, though. Yeah, it's because of... 5 is, though. 5 is, though. Yeah, sure. Okay, fine. Great. This is another thing, actually. Why are these VHS tapes? The series is billed as analog horror, but there's really nothing analog about it. Our flimsy framing device is that the tapes are found in the basement of some random apartment building, but considering that Slug himself has admitted he doesn't care about the immersion, why bother with this at all? It's clear from both his posts on Reddit and the descriptions of his videos that he doesn't have any affection or care.
Wait.
It's clear from both his posts on Reddit and the description of immersion apartment building, but considering that Slug himself has admitted he doesn't care about the immersion.
Why do you care about the immersion? You didn't care about the immersion of the Doubt trilogy.
Why bother with this at all?
So
it's clear from both his posts on Reddit and the descriptions of his videos that he doesn't have any affection or care for analog horror's community, format, or tradition. So why label it that way? It's the same way that the Mandela catalog transitioned out of what we know as analog horror into kind of its own thing. But the difference is that they're the first two words in every title of Urban Spook, and Slug isn't even fucking trying, and never really was. Analog horror exists for two main facets, far as I can parse. As an evolution of the found footage genre, and to extract and codify the inherent horror of looking back on something and seeing it for the horror that it is, or the horror that inserted itself into your memories. It's why, despite my enjoyment of them, I don't resonate as well with things like Vita Carnis as it comes to analog horror as much as I do something like Gemini Home Entertainment. Gemini leans into imagery and themes of old informational films your science teacher put on in the background that have either been tampered with or that you now have the knowledge to understand are wrong in some way. Sometimes both. Vita Carnis should have done something similar to, for example, the Mystery Flesh Pit National Park, a series of singular informationals with maybe the occasional ad. It just doesn't resonate the same. Urban Spook doesn't do even that. It doesn't do either facet well if it bothers to do them at all. I mean, I'm a firm believer in the notion that when it comes to narrative artwork, form follows function. The way you choose to convey the story matters because format can inform why the story is being told this way. Making these descriptions on DeviantArt instead of videos with film grain changes and affects nothing. Why did you even bother? The conceit we're given up front is that these are VHS tapes that are found in the basement of the uploader's apartment. Okay? Why would this info be put on VHS tapes? We're never given a name or a semblance of a clue who the person making these tapes is, but the best I can gather from the context of language and formatting used, it's probably supposed to be a cop. Okay? Well, this information wouldn't have been put on VHS tapes at all, let alone this way. Editing text and images like this onto film is a process, so the police probably would have done these debriefings in person with photos and written blotters, not recorded them like this. And if they did record them, there wouldn't be spooky music added. Did the uploader add that? Why? The whole series is riddled with anachronisms too, and it drives me fucking nuts. A recurring theme is that the killers are caught on camera, but CCTV cameras on the street aren't a thing until the mid-90s into early 2000s, so not exactly in the analog era anymore. And given that Slug doesn't care enough about his story to write any actual characters, it shouldn't surprise you that we don't actually know when or where the story takes place. Yeah, that's right! We're never given a location or a time period for this story. Is it rural Minnesota in the 60s? Jersey in the aughts? Hurricane Utah in 1987? I don't fucking know. God forbid we characterize a town where 21 people, 3 of them cops, for sure died. Yeah, 21 and rising. It was only through some digging I found out the story might take place in Mandeville, Louisiana, and that's only from double-checking the phone number on the YouTube banner. Something the series constantly seems to get praised for as well is its realism, which... where? This is as realistic as a 2014 creepypasta. Yes, I'm sure there's been no leads. Just like I'm so sure that Bleach smoothed Jeff's skin out despite being what caught him on fire, and despite the fact that Bleach isn't flammable. Now, the number isn't the unrealistic part. The record in the United States is Samuel Little with 60 confirmed kills. No, it's the time frame in which this number is reached. Yeah, Samuel killed 60 people. Over 35 years. Because of the way these videos are formatted like absolute dog shit, I have no idea how much time has passed in between kills, but language like in episode 8 where it's described as over the past week, these dudes are stacking bodies 2 to 4 high, like maybe every other day. This must take place in a major metro area if these dudes aren't caught immediately. These dudes for sure aren't human if they haven't been spotted on the street while climbing up a fucking drain pipe or smashing in someone's back basement windows. Also, who the fuck in a residential neighborhood doesn't hear a cat getting its skin sandpapered off, a woman being excavated with scissors, or a man getting his mouth sewn shut and not call the fucking cops? People in residential areas call the cops for people having a party too loud. Not to mention, by the way, bodies reek. You ever smelled something freshly dead? I have. My dad used to hunt. Even the fresh smell of death is unmistakable and strong. The whole house would smell like blood when Dad was cleaning fish. I assure you that I would have noticed that, and I'm sure you at home would know what a rotting body smells like. Also, listen, I understand that in the real world, cops are inadequate dipshits who can't be trusted with a sharp stick, let alone guns. But you have to be fucking kidding me at this point. Let's get the obvious out of the way. Why aren't local cops interviewing people who sell art supplies? Checking their cameras? These dudes have fuck tons of paint and canvas, apparently. That would have been one of the first things I'd check. You also expect me to believe that in all these violent crimes, not one victim tried to fight back physically? Police catch people with DNA under their fingernails all the goddamn time. Not to mention, in Pigs, it mentions the mattress is 1, covered in blood, 2, covered in Viagra, and 3, covered in penicillin, right? You know that penicillin is only administered via injection, right? Because it has a short shelf life, and it has to be refrigerated all the time, and you need a fucking prescription to get Viagra, especially shit-fuck tons of it, so they'd have to be stealing from some kind of pharmacy. That barn mattress is covered in dead skin, blood, and needles, and nobody checked that. Sure. In episode 8, apparently he fucks the wounds, by the way, and nobody checks that either. They out and out say that there's seminal fluid in the wounds, but I guess nobody checks that for DNA. God fuck. One of my main critiques, actually, after watching the whole series, is that it's shockingly boring as fuck. I mean it. If you take out the shock value that random access gore provides, every episode is incredibly boring, despite them clocking it at a top of like 3 minutes. It's a block of text, image, block of text, image, block of text, image, block of text. Unironically, the same experience as reading text commentaries from 2013. I had 3-minute videos on 2 times speed, and they were still managing to drag. That's the thing about things like this that are nothing but shock value. When the shock wears off, you have to provide something underneath, or it just gets boring. It's a big issue with 2000 splatter flicks, actually. Nothing but cardboard set pieces leading bodies into a meat grinder. You get bored of watching the same archetypes get turned into paste by nothing but the same cookie-cutter villain over and over. Something similar is actually why I bounced off the current community darling Mandela catalog. Once Alex abandoned the format he'd been using, the atmosphere that kept me was just kind of gone. Everything became really tedious, and I felt like the premise was wearing thin, and I just stopped being invested. I don't know, maybe I don't have enough religious trauma. Another urban spook contemporary, Greylock, provides both blood and story for an example of how to do this right. It has a compelling mystery, engaging visual and audio design, and some genuinely incredible acting. So if the gore and body horror wears thin, then the atmosphere and characters keep you present. What I've been given is a kill count video without the charm of James Abe Janice and terrible jokes. And all of that's sort of the main issue, isn't it? The series, when viewed with even the slightest change of angle, is plywood and frame without any sort of real charm.
Shake my hand. Come on, boys. Won't you shake a poor sinner's hand? Yeah.
The most common rebuttal to any critique of urban spook from its creator and its fans is that they're weak little piss babies who can't handle gore. I want to state my credentials off the top for exactly this reason. So I'm a reader of Mad K, Fire Punch, Tender is the Flesh. In high school, I used to read about Mengele for fun. My favorite creepypasta is the Russian Sleep Experiment. I listened to the Silent Hill 2 soundtrack and or what amounts to a FNAF jump scare compilation to fall asleep, and I've constantly extolled the virtues of hilarity that is Planet Terror. Do not cite the deep magic to me, heretic. I have my limits, everyone does, but I'm not some pearl-clutching Moralton Puritan. I am a certified freak like the rest of you, a card-carrying lunatic, a blood and gore connoisseur, if you will. I will not have my plate mail stomach questioned by edgy 13-year-olds whether they have subscribers or not. The thing that all those other things have that Urban Spook doesn't is simple. A point. I'm gonna use the best example to contrast why the series fails. Mad K, a manga I mentioned earlier, is drawn and written by Ryu Suzuri about a young man named Makoto Tachibana. Makoto summons a demon named Jay into the world at the cost of his soul for the single purpose of killing and eating him. Makoto has always had fantasies about murder and depravity, but doesn't have any real desire to hurt others. Believing that he is inherently beyond saving, he gives his life and future to a creature that he believes is evil, so he can indulge in these desires on a thing that either can't die, or at least maybe deserves to. Jay, however, is intrigued by this and lures him into deeper, darker depravities. This breaks Makoto's will further because he believes that since his body enjoyed those awful things, that he is further gone than he'd ever known. Jay promises him an escape. Come with him, become a demon. The story from there contains sex, violence, and sexual violence, but never becomes distasteful. Cannibalism is used for the metaphor of having someone truly become a part of you. Brutal, gore-filled sex is a metaphor for destroying intimacy in the name of power and control, and a relationship that's nothing but cruelty and manipulation to show you that abusers and monsters will take your worst traits and convince you that that's all of you. Once in hell, Jay tells Makoto he's a liar. He didn't want to hurt Jay. He was the one who wanted to be hurt. We as the audience know that's not the case. Makoto is afraid of damage. He wants to be in control, to have some agency, some understanding. It's why he made the package in the first place. But Jay convinces him that's what he wanted by violating him and then showing him, see, your body liked it. You're exactly the twisted little masochist I want you to be. He tries to take advantage of that fear and insecurity by allowing him to explore those desires in a way that's cathartic, but not healthy. This separates Makoto further from his humanity. Makoto, meanwhile, is doing everything he can not to become like Jay. When Jay gives him the opportunity to have any twisted desire fulfilled, for example, Makoto asks only to be held. He doesn't want to succumb to those desires, the urges of violence and sadism. He wanted to be understood and be helped. Now it's all he can do to fight the scratch to remain as human as he can. Suzuri-sensei uses artful imagery of violence and gore to inform her story and to make themes known and resonant. You can remove those elements from the story and the narrative maybe wouldn't change, but it wouldn't resonate the same. Its gore, its violence, is intrinsic to the experience trying to be created. It's why Mad K resonates with me where something similar, like Has Been Hotel, doesn't. For all of its talk of being mature, Has Been just isn't. I've not seen anything handled in a more complex or interesting way than anything on Cartoon Network. Many people I know and respect excuse some of the sentiments and behavior of characters in Has Been the same way I would characters in Mad K, namely with the excuse that it's all set in hell. I can't. The only difference between it and Steven Universe in its construction is sex jokes and cartoon blood. It's childish. It tries to handle serious, fucked up topics, but does so with the same lens as any other Cartoon Network or Nickelodeon show. It's childish in the same way with sex that Urban Spook is with violence. Slug uses extreme, sickening levels of gore like a 13-year-old boy who just discovered Mortal Kombat. Violence needs to serve something in its narrative, whether it's establishing setting, motivation, tone, theme. If you have killers in Urban Spook simply stab each person 666 times instead of the over-the-top cartoonish levels of gore, nothing changes. It serves no purpose. The purpose is shock, if it's even that, and that wears thin. It's a jump scare with less effort. I have to provide some sort of tension in a scene for me to get a jump scare out of you. But if I go to the local bookstore and show people images of the Black Dahlia corpses, it'll make them sick, angry, and afraid, sure, but that's it. They don't get anything out of that experience other than a second lunch, and I don't get anything out of that creatively other than a restraining order. Exploiting human suffering for the sake of making people uncomfortable is that. Exploitation. Okay, let me look back at the story and I'm going to demonstrate my point. What does the violence say about the killers? Nothing. There's no pattern to their victims that indicates that they're taking out rage against any kind of particular person. Gender, age, location, method, all of these things are seemingly random. Since the story is supposedly from a third-person perspective, their method and victim patterns are all we have to characterize them. We can only see them through the eyes of a bystander. Real-life serial killers commit their acts in patterns because humans are creatures of habit. We do what's easy and what's cathartic. Not that complicated to figure out. The randomness of it could be something, though, couldn't it? The idea they're just grabbing people at random because of an implicit hatred of life? True. But then why these complex, detailed method? If it was some kind of just general hatred for living things and they just wanted to destroy them, why not just stab random people on the street? Why wouldn't there be more than 21? Nothing about their victims gives us a sense of motive. It's unclear why they're doing what they're doing. For example, alternates hunt humans to replace them, right? Wood crawlers and Carnus are inhuman monsters following their instincts. Got me? The killers in Urban Spook just brutalize. Even the operator, right? The grandfather of all unfiction. His method served a point. He broke people down to their fundamental level and then either used them as one of his arms into the world or took them away. No, we were never told why he does this, because the nature of what it's doing is enough of a clue. It was hunting people, recruiting them. For what we don't know, but its method of breaking someone beforehand told us that it was some kind of priming for whatever fate they met when they were spirited away. The killers in Urban Spook aren't acting out a deep-seated rage. They're not hunting for food. They're not finding companions. They're not satisfying an unseen monster or worshipping an unknown god. They're just killing. Just to do it. What does the violence say about the victims? Again, nothing. The victims are never characterized beyond their brutal deaths, so we never get to know them. Get to see their insights, their feelings, their lives. We don't know what those deaths say about them as people. The only one I can think of is maybe Ian Ford being stuffed into the pig because he was a cop, but then what did giving it Fiona's eyes mean? May being Mr. Hands to death, for example, doesn't say anything about her if we don't know anything about her to begin with. Let's say she was sleeping around, cheating on Ian for years. Well, then it'd be a comment on her adultery. If she was a militant vegan, it could be a sign of her putting animals on the same level as people, or a commentary on some kind of hypocrisy. If we knew more about her relationship with her family, maybe it was about her caring more about her animals than her own kids. But we don't know that. We don't know anything. We don't know anything about May, or Ian, or Fiona, or any of the characters that we ever meet, because they're not characters. Having the horse rearrange this woman means nothing other than to make the audience squirm from the sexual brutalizing of some random woman at the hands of an animal. Woo. Amazing. Creative. Absolutely fucking thrilling. There's no lifeline for the audience to know the victims. No way for us to know why these people earned these quote-unquote fates. If they're symbolic, we never know. Adding an external site to have these things presented to the audience via some kind of form of participation would go a long way to investing us in the stories, the characters, and then making the deaths feel more cathartic. But now, they're just there. The most you could say about the violence is that it says something about the setting, but only in that its law enforcement is vestigial at best. It's there because it has to be, not because it does anything. It doesn't do anything but provide us with a meager framing device. The violence doesn't even tell us about the uploader because they don't have a character. The person uploading these videos needs to be there for them to be on YouTube. There's no kayfabe pretending this is someone specific like in Ben Drowned or Pets Cop. The first fucking link in their About section is for merch. Of the children that are brutalized physically and sexually, by the way, buy the t-shirt. All the way down, that's the problem. The violence is grotesque and disturbing for nothing. It's the weird kid in class holding out a dead squirrel by the tail to make the other kids scream. Doesn't mean anything other than the kid might be a serial killer himself. It's all empty shock and spectacle. Nothing more, nothing less. There's nothing to it, there's no point, and therefore, it doesn't work.
For the next stage, a brine is made out of sea salt and plastic-laced water.
Now, something I've noticed from a lot of people in these extreme horror scenes is that they're not good at accepting any form of criticism. They always seem to be immature man-babies. I wonder why that might be. Well, anyway, Slug is no different. You thought this wasn't gonna be a little commentary? You fool. You idiot! Of course it is! So while I was scripting this, area FBI watch list topper Wendigoon made a video comparing and contrasting Urban Spook with Greylock, a much better analog horror series. And within a few hours, Slug left a comment on it. I'm gonna show you why this comment is full of enough holes to be diagnosed with Kuru, and prove that he's kind of a piece of shit who can't take critique.
Wow. I can't wrap my head around the fact that you actually made a video talking about something I created. Even if it's not necessarily in a good light, it's still surreal to me since I've watched your content for some time.
Yeah, I just think it's interesting to come across so cordially given some things we'll see later, but yeah, okay.
There are some things I really want to clarify. One, I have no idea where you've heard that I don't care about my series, or that I made it only to sell shirts. That is not true. I made the first couple of episodes just for fun, but since it blew up, I really want to improve and try my hand at something new for each episode, like animation or voice acting.
Me? I know why he'd think that. Because that's what you said.
Yo, I just made this series for fun. Mostly to promote my art and music. Immersion isn't really anything I prioritize at the moment. The series is mainly a way for me to promote my art and to come up with fun kills. but there's definitely a deeper story there too for the keen-eyed viewer.
I can't imagine why he would see something that you posted publicly about only doing the series to promote your artwork, something you were already selling as merchandise pre-series and then relabeled after the characters had names, and assumed that you were only doing it to promote your artwork. What a wild conclusion to draw!
I age-restricted episode 5 myself, since this was around the time I realized that there were a lot of kids watching my series. The Painter is intended for an 18-plus audience. I had no idea that so many young people in the community were watching when I started.
Oh, yeah, that's right. None of these episodes were age-restricted. Let me say it again for the people in the back. The episodes of this series where a woman is raped to death by a horse, a young girl is implied to have been skull-fucked, a corpse's injuries are fucked post-mortem, and a cat is skinned alive and then also fucked are not age-gated. There's two big issues with that. First of all, the fact that all of these extreme depictions of gore were put in a place where you knew children could see, despite claiming this. You know how I know this is negligence? Because you've admitted it in multiple posts. You know this is 18 plus content, but you've never age-gated it. Especially when, in some of those posts, you admit you know you're talking to children. I'm gonna choose to give you the benefit of the doubt and assume that those posts were, like, after you'd age-gated 5, but that doesn't help you when you know you're talking to kids and the rest of your content's not age-gated.
Like I've said, the series is aimed for an 18-plus audience. It's very hard to take any advice or criticism from kids seriously. I've also realized that in the quote-unquote analog horror community is filled with mostly children. This is something I didn't know, since I've never been a part of the community before I made my first video, Faces, but my series is obviously aimed towards an adult audience and shouldn't be consumed by kids.
Yeah, that second part, by the way, is gonna come in handy after a little while, so, like, hold on to that.
Also, the episode was planned out way before any controversy started. It was not a response to angry people on Twitter. Speaking of, please don't take anything I do on Twitter seriously. A lot of people know me solely from Twitter by now, but I really only use that site to troll.
So some of you probably don't know what this is about. I do, however, despite his attempt to delete it. Most people heard about Slug from a particular interaction that he had on Twitter with the horror creator and resident noodleman Postra. He is referring to this tweet.
We need to stop praising series that rely entirely on shock value to carry their horror. Stuff like Urban Spook drives me nuts because the only horror in it relies entirely on trying to describe the most vile thing possible with little. Is that too overdramatic? I hope that was too overdramatic.
You're such a fucking pussy. Just because extreme horror doesn't fit into your little autistic furry horror taste doesn't mean that there isn't a place for it. Use your platform to talk about things you like instead of shitting on actual creators. Cunt!
So let's take this at Slug's word, right? Trolling. Huh? Okay. So what part of this was a joke? Was it the ableism of calling Postra autistic in some form of, like, derogatory term, or, like, the weird assertion of him being a furry? Like, what part of this is a bit, my guy? Trick question. It's not. You know how I know it's not? Because I know how to read. So Postra does use his platform to talk about things he likes. In fact, every video of Postra's that I've ever watched has been highlighting something that he enjoys. It's how I found out about Nobody Lives Under the Lighthouse, It Steals, and Five Nights at Treasure Island, by the way. In fact, I could only find maybe 3 videos on his channel about things he doesn't like, and even then, they're constructive and helpful. The actual creator's bit is also wrong, because Postra makes his own series, Dreams of an Insomniac. Before you criticize me, by the way, and call me not a content creator or not an actual creator, I make horror content too. They're on this channel. I just thought we'd cut that off at the pass, you know, just in case. The final nail in the coffin, how I know it's not trolling, is this post you put up on Reddit.
Postra is a rat. This isn't the first time he talked shit. Maybe I went a little hard. I don't know. As I'm sure you're aware, there has been an extreme amount of hate lately. I guess this kinda was the last straw for me. This isn't the first fairly big content creator that basically says I shouldn't have a place in the community simply because I do extreme horror.
So it wasn't a troll. You just got ass mad that one of the big boys didn't like your shoddy garbage. Stunned. Flabbergasted. Absolutely fucking smeckledorfed.
That's not even a word, and I agree with you.
I don't really care if anyone hates my work. I'm very aware that it's extreme and provocative. I get the criticism about the writing being shit. Art and music are things I've done my whole life, and they're what I mainly want to put out there with the series. I've never done writing before, and telling a story with deep lore, etc. was never the point. However, there's definitely more to it. There's a bunch of hidden things in the episodes, from one-frame puzzles to clues in the audio design. I even think there's stuff people still haven't found. Seeing the community come together to figure out the name of the painter was really cool. There's more there, even if it's not that deep. No, the presentation is a bit janky, mostly because English isn't my first language. It's one of my favorite aspects of the series. If I ever made a remaster of the series, please don't! I would keep all the spelling mistakes, etc. in. I like the camp.
First off, this isn't camp. Like, we can argue semantic definitions of genre till the cows come home, and like 3 people in my audience are going to care, so I'm not gonna get into the nuance of it. Watch Hazel. But it isn't. Camp is characterized by a low-budget but authentic presentation. Something done in earnest, but not executed the best. There is nothing earnest about Urban Spook. Resident Evil is camp. Birdemic is camp. Fucking Sharknado is camp. Urban Spook is boring and mean-spirited, much like the person who writes it, if I'm being completely candid. So also, here's the thing about amateur writing. True. I can feel this is a first project. I wouldn't rail on it for being that, which is why I haven't. It's why for all my gripes about the Mandela catalog, I don't hate the thing. It's Alex Kister's first big thing, as you can tell. A lot of choices in execution and design don't work for me, but they work for most of the community, and I can tell that a lot of these things will be sanded out as he progresses. He's a very talented man. However, you refuse to accept critique of it in any way, and then lash out like a child when you don't get your way. Postra gets an ableist piss-baby response for the same critique, but I noticed Iceberg Boy over here gets a nice, well-behaved invertebrate. I wonder why that is. Could it be because his number is bigger and you like him, or, you know, I have some thoughts about the way that Wendigoon presents being part of it, considering that you hurled weird dog whistly shit at Postra, you know? The one that's obviously AMAB and, like, cis-straight white man being the one you don't insult. I'm gonna choose to believe it's the bigger number, but given the context of that other response, we're gonna make an assertion. Friendly note, I don't take observation of the obvious as an insult, so you can just be upfront and call me the slur. Okay, we don't need the dog whistle this time. Autistic isn't an insult for me, I just am.
Lastly, hearing you say that I have talent made me really happy. Like I said, I've been enjoying your content for a long time, and I hope that I can create something that you can also enjoy in the future. Rob is a great guy, and I'm so glad to see his project grow. In fact, it might be the first analog horror series I decided to watch, thanks to how you talk about it. Say hi to Papa Meat for me. Much love.
Oh yeah, that's right! He admits he's never watched another analog horror series. That's something he's fairly open about, though.
This is something I didn't know, since I've never been a part of the community before I made my first video, Faces.
I just think it's interesting that you were never a fan, didn't understand the medium, have never partaken in a single entry, so I wonder why you would have picked analog horror as your chosen aesthetic. Couldn't be because it's incredibly popular and easy to make if you're a lazy shitheel who wants to sell merchandise. No, it's from genuine enjoyment, like right now, right? Which is why you're 8 episodes in and only now watching your first analog horror series, despite the fact that this is like your magnum opus and you're like your first branch into real writing. You'd think you'd have done some research beforehand. It's almost like you didn't give that much of a shit about it. Anyway, that's why you're going to be distancing yourself from the community post-conclusion of your series, right?
I've said it before. I'll keep calling this series analog horror, quote unquote, for consistency. But as soon as it's done, I'm drawing myself away from analog horror community. I'll keep making horror content on the channel, though.
Interesting. Now, I don't want this to be me simply shitting on something I dislike. I like to try and be constructive at the very least, even if it's something shitty with a bad creator. Ever since I was young, I was taught to analyze why things I don't like in a medium I enjoy don't work to make my own content better. So, let me explain what I would change if I had to make Urban Spook. So, I'm gonna do this in as good faith as I can manage. I'm gonna keep all the plot beats the same. Images, gore, everything. Just assume that those things are the same. Same pictures, same overall gory descriptions. I want to be fair. All I'm doing is changing framing. I want to make a point. Here we go. Fundamental opening change. Not making videos. No need for a video format. Straight up doesn't make sense, clashes thematically. We're going for something welcome home and making our own website. But this time, for a fake art gallery. First few posts are normal. Just various surrealist artwork by an unnamed painter. Gallery receives them wrapped up in brown paper, placed on their doorstep. Mystery's part of the appeal of their showing, so they're selling. They don't particularly care, especially when it's implied that because the artist is anonymous, they don't have to share the profits with him. Suddenly, a more disturbing piece arrives. Carla's teeth is where it starts, where the pattern begins. The paintings are twisted. They're disturbing. They sell because critics can pretend they understand the deep, tortured meaning. So they're listed on the gallery's online shop page for an outrageous price, already sold out. Reviews beneath it, pseudo-intellectual garbage, make no sense. Something close to a meaning, but not really. Sort of just pretending they understand what's going on. We get our first connection. A personal blog that's definitely created by the artist. A discussion of twisted nightmares of pulling out his own teeth. About how satisfying it would feel since he's been grinding his own teeth lately. It's brushed off as an intrusive thought, something that he thinks about idly. He laughs about the absurdity of it, just a mouthful of teeth that he keeps pulling out one by one every time they ache. He talks in other posts about the fact that he submits things to the gallery and online anonymously because he's both a little afraid of the rejection and, admittedly, more afraid of all the attention. A shut-in, a loner, maybe a touch agoraphobic. He was surprised by his popularity, but he cannot handle the newfound attention. No spotlight for him, he just wants his work to be seen. He's happy people like his work. He feels seen, heard. Our third source. A police blotter. Carla Gray has been murdered. Stabbed 38 times, her teeth removed. No entry, no exit. A newspaper excerpt tells us when her funeral will be. We see a note from a detective about the details. This is where our pattern begins. This continues, sure, over and over and over. A painting, an entry, a body. A painting, an entry, a body. The painter becomes afraid. His nightmares, his intrusive thoughts, the deepest, darkest thoughts in what we can tell is an unwell mind are slowly being acted out by a force that he cannot command or control. It only becomes clearer and clearer with each brutal death that he is seeing through something else's eyes. These nightmares, these intrusive thoughts are not his own, but that of something else. Brought to these moments by eyes that are not human, so cannot understand the cold destruction that it is wreaking. We see him plead and beg for it to stop. At first. His paintings continue to sell. Their ties to a suspicious murder make them valuable and sought after. It's genius, they say. A man interprets the horror around him to make the layman see and confront the terror. The artist is outed, found out by the police via his fingerprints on the paintings. He's cleared. He has an alibi. He was never there. But his way of always seeming to know draws more attention, more comments. More viewers can comment. They can sway the artist's tone. They can agree that his work is transcendent. His entries become more egotistical, more narcissistic. That of course only he understands. That his will and desires are so powerful that they're carving a bloody swath through the neighborhood. That his pain is recognized. That his fear may be taking innocent lives. But that's what they deserve. To be a part of his art is the highest honor, of course. For them to die so that others can understand him is all that matters. Should those comments turn on him, though, they become heretics. People who don't understand his torment. He is an unwilling victim, beholden to the creature he is seeing and hearing, who is getting closer, more brutal, more violent, whose eyes are becoming sharper and beginning to enjoy the pain. He's afraid. He's letting out that fear in the only way he can, lashing out, and he is innocent. It's not his fault that people like his work. It's not his fault that he was chosen to be this thing's vessel. It's not his fault that any of this is happening. He's letting out his own feelings the only way he knows how, so why can we not understand him the way they do? Why does he have to suffer alone? It's not fair. We see every victim's story laid out. Obituaries, emails from work, family text, outcries in the community. The fear and heartache of this small town are being laid out for us via that third, unbiased sight. We see the police's rising tension, the irritation at being ineffectual, the general public's terror to even leave their homes. This small town in Louisiana is getting smaller and smaller by the day, people becoming more and more afraid. But we can see these details presented to us, giving us a picture of who suffers and who dies for the painter's suffering to finally be understood. Something he feels entitled to, regardless of how the town shrinks around him. The story I'd create does these things to touch on themes of entitlement, of isolation, of misunderstanding, of loneliness. It discusses themes of how the art community glamorizes the mental illness of the artist, only encouraging that suffering to continue, exacerbate, and get worse. Van Gogh is famous for losing an ear, after all. How art can turn from well-meaning expression into the exploitation of others in the pursuit of money and fame. How it doesn't matter if you hurt others as long as your art reigns out. How caring only for what others around you think, as opposed to how those things make you feel, destroys your mind and your relationships with others, making your art stagnate, become cruel, and become indifferent. I don't know. Seemed poignant to me.
Ultimately, it's kind of a shame. I hate to see this kind of thing. I always want to see someone skilled in our field do something new and interesting. I'd rather something sharp and new. I love checking out new projects from smaller creators purely because it means that they could be doing something I've never fucking seen before. It's why I love things like Valle Verde, the Sophie series, Greylock. New creators I've never heard of doing incredible things with a really cool medium. But, you know, I always want to give something the benefit of the doubt, but I can't extend it to Urban Spook. It's just not that. It's mean-spirited, cruel, disgusting, boring, stale, and its creator is a fucking man-child that can't take the slightest bit of criticism. I want to see the scene stay good and get better. I've also talked over and over about the responsibility that we as creators of the terrifying have when we're holding the nightmares of our audience in our hands. It all keeps coming back to the quote I read at the beginning. Fear and revulsion aren't the same thing. Only a hack would confuse the two. Let's hope instead of the brutality of a hatchet, our artist here learns how to use a palette knife. I think his art would benefit from the change of tools, to be honest. See you in the next one. Goodbye.
That video was just ass.
I don't think I've ever seen someone who misunderstands horror so much. And I'm not even a horror guy. She just doesn't fucking understand it at all. Exactly. Hiten thinks there has to be logic behind every fucking thing. Like, no, there doesn't. Shit, it's been fucking, what, 40-something years since the original Friday 13th came out? And Jason still doesn't have a motive of killing people? I mean, he has a backstory. Like, he got bullied and died in the Crystal Lake, so he haunts the camp and kills anybody that comes in. But that's not really a motive for it. If it were up to Hiten would try to fucking logicize every single person's death. That's not how horror works. Some people just get killed. That's how it is. She doesn't understand how slashers work. Because everything needs to be psychological. This one's just absolute ass so badly. Oh, hang on, let's go back to this one real quick because there was something funny. Urban Spook himself actually commented on it.
Obscure and terrifying, so I end up in a lot of weird little... Sometimes, YouTube sends me down a rabbit hole that I can't possibly see the bottom of. It's happened with a lot of things that I like, honestly. I'm always drawn to things that are obscure and terrifying, so I end up in a lot of weird little pockets of weirder, littler communities. I found that over time, every community will find a way to the macabre and twisted, whether it's the intention or not. Maybe that's human nature. Who can say? Today, though, I found a small pocket of space within a much larger community. This is what they call Orineo. So, in order to teach you about Orineo, I first have to tell you about Incredibox. Incredibox is an app that was developed by French dev company So Far So Good back in 2009. The game lets you drag and drop various characters, called pogos apparently, into a lineup. They all make some sort of sound, melody, so you can mix and match them to make your own music with your own little acapella gang. I've messed around with the app on my phone a few times before. It's really kind of fun. I enjoyed it a lot, actually. It's an easier tool for someone like me who doesn't have a good ear for music creation. In Incredibox, there's different themes that provide totally different sounds. An example of the defaults that I liked was Alive. I liked it because it had a very Japanese streetwear vibe and some of my favorite colors, predominantly, but I also really liked the overall sound of the music. Naturally, where there's a game with creative freedom, there's a modding scene. And where there's a modding scene, you'll typically find something spooky. That's where we found Orineo. Now, the original Orineo was uploaded to Scratch, which is a website that was made by MIT with a simple programming language geared towards teaching kids how to make video games. On July 8th, 2023, by an account called AltAccountHMB, Orineo was first put up on the website. The phrase, Orineo, is apparently Yoruba, which is a West African language spoken by, surprise, the Yoruba people. You hear it mostly in certain areas of Nigeria, Benin, and Togo. Supposedly it means happy song. It was taken down from Scratch due to its apparently violent content and was re-uploaded by Cormike onto Itch.io. That's where I played it. The description originally read, "I couldn't deal with it anymore. It wasn't fair. Something had to be done. They deserved endless torture beyond their understanding. If I can't understand, then when their time comes, they shouldn't understand either. I have the tools, but I can't use them." That got me pretty quick. I get the feeling being communicated here. The notes said, "This project is the result of ferrofluid machines and a cult made by the same guy inventing ferrofluid machines." Huh. Little ineloquent, but that's something. Ferrofluid, huh? For those of you who don't know, that's a real thing. Ferrofluid is what you call liquids that can be affected by magnets. Ferrous means that it has iron in it. Little vocab lesson side note. Ferrofluid is used for a lot of stuff already, but in this current tangent, we should focus on two things in particular because I think they're the ones that are most relevant to the story. I'll save you the long science lesson, mostly because I didn't really understand it, and just kind of sum it up. Ferrofluid, as you've probably seen it in commercial products, like these, it helps visualize sound with the help of an electromagnet. I'd imagine that's how the creator first came across it too, but that's just a guess. The other way, though, is more narratively interesting. It's apparently used in things like gene splicing. Apparently you can use it to isolate certain cells and just remove them with an electromagnet. It's also being used in nanosurgery to, hopefully, one day, remove tumors cleanly and at the cellular level. Didn't think we'd end up learning about nanosurgery in a video about a music app, but this community takes me to weird places, and if I had to learn about it, so do you. Fun little science lesson. Let's get back on track, though. Something important I wanted to talk about later is that the mod was actually overhauled by a different team at a later date. Siren Bread, the Spook Police, Mr. Medicated Oil, Void Eyewatch, Pummel, and Purple Shadow YT gave us that. I'm going to talk a little bit later about the technical side of it, but let's listen to the music, check out the lore, we'll discuss what that story means. Lie or dream. Age, likely 38. Gender, likely male. This is the conceptualization of Redacted's fear after experiencing trauma when encountering a rotting corpse in the ventilation of his best friend's home. He thought it was alive and froze in the same place for 26 hours, waiting for it to snap to life and kill him. His friend was convicted of murder, and he was given therapy, which then resulted in this document being recorded. A crude drawing by the person undergoing therapy was given. Okay, so this one is one of the few that actually kind of gets under my skin. Literally the others require some sort of physical body or contact with human flesh, which makes the weird sci-fi this is supposed to be feel more consistent. But not this one? I don't know, it's a weird outlier. The other thing about this that really trips me up is that time. 26 hours? He was sitting in a vent for a full day and some change? I think this is this way because the author doesn't have a good time scale for how long shock would actually set in. I'd shorten that significantly. Hart, age 17. Gender, female. Hart was a victim in the apartment fire caused by Kurt. Hart ran out of the building without her arms, bleeding, and her torso on fire. She passed out on the street and almost died, but a bystander had called 111 before many people died. Hart suffered severe vocal damage, and trying to speak caused her to spew blood onto the floor. After being put into an optimal state, she was taken to recovery where she is currently right now. Given the level of damage in the sprite, I'd say more than her torso is on fire. There's also no reason given for her arms to have been missing, which I think is a missed opportunity. I think a lot more could be done with this one in order to make the image a little more visceral and highlight the nature of said injuries. Burning is a very scary and painful thing to experience. The vocal damage as well is a good idea, but the fire would have been the least likely cause. I'd make it the smoke, since the way that most people die isn't from the fire. It's from suffocating on your own burning flesh. Don't know if you knew that, but now you do. Name, unknown. Age, 16 to 20. Gender, male. This was a sculpture donated to a museum. Many people reported hearing muffled screaming coming from the statue. After 6 days of being up in the museum, an investigation was made, and it was found out that it was the top half of a person with a hole drilled into their head and then covered in clay. They were somehow alive, but had died minutes before the investigation. It appeared as if he had died after the clay around the neck broke and the weight of the other clay put on his head snapped his head off. Aw, man, I love Romea. Maybe I'll talk about it at another point. Listen, I like the spirit here, but the thing to remember is cohesion. This doesn't make a lot of sense in concert with every other thing. I'd make an extension of Akacher's experiment, you'll hear about them later. It ties these things in together a little better, and it doesn't add another weird outlier that doesn't really get brought back up. Like, I don't understand who would have done this. The cult? So is the cult not writing these documents? I thought the cult was writing these documents. That's a little confusing. Also, I don't understand why the age fluctuates. I'd split the difference. Name, redacted. Gender, male. Age, 36. A great friend of, redacted. However, they were known to be alcoholic and was once found being mauled by a tiger at a zoo after it had closed. Thankfully, someone who was on the night shift had seen this and shot the tiger. Redacted tried to reassemble their corpse and bring him back to life. Listen, I get it. I saw that the wiki said this was meant to be a funny furry joke and haha, Harambe bit, but I think with a little more effort and a little more brutality, this could have been a really compelling choice. Maulings are, again, a painful and terrifying way to die, but this is just a little too over the top. I'd rein it back, make the kill itself a little more controlled, a little more violent even, personally. And animal cruelty like this is a tough sell, so you really have to have a more distinct purpose for it, other than funny joke. Name, classified. Age, 36. Gender, female. Our third prototype. It was a success, but failed in form. We could only simulate her pain, not actually revive her. This is where I'm going to take my first real detour and yap for a second. Quite a few of these are too short to really give me anything, but I think I get why. They want them to be punchy, have the spookiest vibe. Having a few of them that are 1 or 2 sentences, they really have to stand out though. The thing is, you want something that implies a lot with only a little. Baby shoes for sale, never worn, has the punch it does because it says a lot with only a few words. There's so much there. You're not you. They look like monsters to you. These are also really good examples. The other thing to consider is that they have a lot of pre-existing context to work from. I think not only can it be done, but that it's done better later on in these recordings. But I think that either the word choice needs to be very carefully considered, or you have to have pre-existing context for the hit to really land. As for the entry itself, I'm going to chalk a lot of this up to being a non-native English speaker or a wonky translation, because it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Failed in form doesn't really explain why she's a bunch of TVs. I don't know, I feel like you had to give us more for that to work. Ethan, age 19. Gender, male. Ethan Tadpole was a musician with great talent. Unfortunately, he was murdered at the age of 19 via being shot in the eyes with a pistol and then having a tuba dropped onto his face. It appeared that he was murdered by another musician called Lilac, but she was proven innocent a few weeks ago. Ethan is the first real instance where I feel like there's a really cool overarching story here. I think that having a good number of the victims be tied together is a great idea. I just wish it was executed a little smoother, and that we saw it more frequently. For the kill itself, I don't know why a tuba was picked. Lilac plays a guitar, so if we wanted blunt force, I don't know why that particular instrument. Is it supposed to be Ethan's instrument? Why would Ethan and Lilac be tied together as musicians if one of them played a tuba? What a wild band they must be in. I presume it's because it's a funny object, but I don't think the occasional humor works here in something that's overall so much more gruesome. Also, I'd reverse the order. I'd say she hits him in the head first, doesn't kill him, so she shoots him twice. A better story, personally, but that's just me. Name, unknown. Age, 18. Gender, female. One of the few cultists we were able to find. Strangely, they had advanced body augmentation curing the AIDS she had. Okay, so this is supposed to be an outside source talking about the cultists. It's, I don't know, a little weird. I feel like these should be internal memos, I guess. That makes a little bit more sense. Also, yeah, we have to talk about this now. The thing about using story elements that people really suffer from is that you really have to be careful about that execution. Things like mental illness, which we'll talk about a little later, and serious medical conditions like this shouldn't be thrown in as just words or an excuse to have something happen. They should be integral to some facet of the story, so it doesn't feel like you're using someone's very real suffering as a passive shock value tactic. I'm not going to get super into it, because I talked about that a lot in my Urban Spook video, but I address this in the How Would I Do It section of this video, because I feel like it's easier to show than explain. In the future, I'd heavily advise doing something like AIDS so flippantly, though. Name. Age, 45. Gender, male. He deserved it. This is a way better execution of what I was talking about earlier. I actually don't have a lot of notes for this one. I think this is exactly the kind of punch that it needed. The changes I made in my section to this were just personal preference because I thought it would be good to expand it, but honestly, I love this the way that it is. I also looked up the letters, got nothing. I have no fucking idea. It might be a keyboard smash, it might be a word in another language I can't read. I'm not totally sure. Name, Alpha and Zeta. Alpha's age, 46. Zeta's age, 39. Gender, both male. Our fourth prototype. It had failed as the two subjects we were testing had fused and become two consciousnesses. We had wished to use Zeta's skin and not fuse Alpha to Zeta, but the wounds were more severe than we had thought. This is another one I really like and I don't have a lot of notes on. My main one is that I'd make how the fusion happened either a little clearer or a total accident. My brain reads this as a skin graft that eventually morphed into Zeta growing out of Alpha, and I think that kind of body horror really fucking rules. Name, Lilac. Age, 44. Gender, female. Lilac was a famous musician. Then one day at a concert, they were murdered on stage by what the audience described as a mass of wires covered in oil wrapped around a shadowy figure. This did not seem like a person, but rather a machine. However, it was apparently too natural to be artificial.
This is another one where I think the awkward wording is mostly to blame. I think the ideas here are really strong, but the execution... Making a proper monster isn't really a bad idea. In fact, I like it a lot, but I think the only real place that this monster is mentioned is here, and I also think that having it happen on stage isn't a great idea, considering that now it raises the question of why the thing hasn't been totally shut down if, say, Pink is brutally murdered on stage by a sludge beast. I don't know, small nitpicks here.
Name, Stanley. Age, 20 to 30. Gender, male. A man who is currently relatively unknown was found running through a homeless shelter naked, and they were extremely high on psilocybin cubensis. After running outside, many people recall him cackling hysterically as he ran. He was then chased by police and beat to death outside of an elderly woman's home.
Another case where I think a very serious subject is mentioned but not expanded upon enough for my liking or comfort. I think you could really push this a little further. And it's magic mushrooms, for those of you who are curious like me. I saved you the Google search. I like it overall, though. Very strong, very simple. It's another one that connects to someone else later, at least I think so. There's a few details to clean up, but that's because I'm cringe.
Name, none. Age, none. Gender, none. This was an old TV that was tampered with using ferrofluid and rotting flesh.
This is another one I think suffers a lot for its lack of expansion. In my version, I tied it to Prototype 3 as branching narrative, and I think it's stronger for it. Since there's only the two that are solely inanimate objects anyway, I'd have leaned into it a little more.
Kurt. Age, 12. Gender, male. Kurt was a 12-year-old child who suffered from schizophrenia. He was very introverted and did not speak often, so his hallucinations were never brought up before with his parents. At 5:25 a.m. on the 24th of May, he set a building on fire due to his undiscovered schizophrenia. Most people in the building evacuated, but Kurt had trapped himself inside the building after many vivid hallucinations. When the building collapsed, he was stuck in the rubble for 2 days before being excavated and sent to the hospital, where he was heavily wrapped in bandages. He died later that day.
Given what we know later, I think this one is good. I think it's one of, if not the longest entry with the most detail, and I'd have made all of them this long personally, but I think it has enough basic gist of the story with opportunities for expansion in other entries. I think I'd have made those expansions clearer here, but again, just me. I think it works just fine. It's a personal thing. It's also a far better use of implementation of an illness. Not perfect by any means, but definitely better.
Name, Kratzper, Oregon. Age, 42. Gender, male. Kratzper was our first attempt at mimicking the technology used by the cult to restore to optimal states. He had an extreme injury causing near-death experience. Many of his senses were damaged, but the mimic was very effective.
This one's fascinating. I think Kratz is actually one of my favorites of the original group. It has a lot of weird, unsettling implications. The look is really cool. I'm just overall a fan of a lot of the ideas at play here. Very good.
Name, Tab. Age, 34. Gender, male. Not much is known about Tab. All we know is that he works in an office building and has a strange body pigment disorder. Why was I told to write this document? There is also white text that says, "There is nothing wrong with Tab. Stop trying to call him wrong. It is not an alias."
I think Tab is a victim of, I want to expand on this character after I've already written him disease. A terrible affliction. It affects thousands of fanfic writers every year. No, I don't
hate it, but I think that the transition to what happens later is bumpy as all hell. I think the only remedy for this is to go back and smooth it out with narrative sandpaper until the seam lines are no longer visible. I'll demonstrate how I do that later, but this is something that affects a lot of young or newer writers. Just starting with a character that you like, but then deciding later on that he's more important than he actually is. Remember to check your first drafts, kids. Name, James. Age, 27. Gender, male. James had no care for his own life and was extremely aggressive towards all people he had known in his life. This resulted in what he called his final act. He had put his neck in a vice and killed himself simply to spite his loving father. Later, he had awoken in the ceiling of an apartment building where he was tortured by many people via acts such as killing his dog and stealing his belongings. Afterward, they had let a child into the building and forced the child to set the building on fire. This is where I feel like we're a little unbalanced. Suicide's also a tough sell, and the method is tedious, impossible, and weird. I think the implication is that James is supposed to be the body we found at the beginning, and is supposed to be the impetus for Kurt burning the building down. You'll see. I think the idea of this being where we find out about him is odd, and quite frankly, I think this level of cruelty is absolutely unnecessary. I don't know. This is one of the weakest ones to me. Name, Derek. Age, 56. Gender, male. Derek's body was found dead and newly resurrected in an apartment with 2 nails in his eyes and a car jack beside him covered in blood. He was still alive, but by the time he was found, he had starved to death before any medical attention could be brought to him. Dave's uniform was beside him, and this uniform led him to an office building. However, the owner of the building said that Dave died years ago, even though forensics showed that the corpse was only present in that location for 3 days. I don't hate the basic premise of this, but again, it's a lot of weird methods and details and weird things that don't appear anywhere else, and I just don't think it's very well constructed. But the implication here, for example, is that the nails were hammered in with the car jack? Why? I get the idea of trying to have cool deaths that stand out, but I feel like stuff like this is really overly complicated and clunky. It gives the implication of like an old school Final Destination kill, and I'm not really fond of that. I think it's unfortunately way too much. Name, none. Age, 6. Gender, female. Our final experiment. It was a 100% success as the duck became immortal after using ferrofluid and could be easily tortured. I don't know why the duck is here. Why is the fucking duck here? On God, I think it's the comedy elements that make this feel wildly out of place. I don't get it. This is insane. Elements that make this. I don't know why the duck is here. Why is the fucking duck here? On God, I think it's the comedy elements that make this feel wildly out of place. I don't get it. This is insane. I'd cut it entirely. Why? Why is there a duck here? The narrative here is absolutely deranged. I have no more thoughts about the duck.
A duck walked up to a lemonade stand and he said to the man, run in the stand.
Name, Koski. Age, 28. Gender, female. Koski was a YouTuber who explored the genre of 3 a.m. horror with a twist. Obviously, there wasn't such a thing as an uwu cult, so she hired actors. Her depiction of a cult was very offensive, and we had killed her to repay the mockery. She was revived, however, and sent back to society, where she later deleted her channel and went to therapy for 17 years. Okay, this is another one with a good premise that kind of falls on its face in the execution. I think the idea of prodding at something you don't really have any idea about that ends up backfiring is a classic. And listen, I fucking hate J-Station as much as the next person, but I think the implementation of this is a little awkward. Why release her back into the world? Why let her keep going? Why does the math here imply that she was only 11? Like, that's a great subtextual detail and makes a lot of things really unsettling, but how was she hiring actors if she was 11? Were her parents in on it? Why didn't you kill her parents, too? I don't know. I feel like there's a more twisted and well-thought-out way to execute on a really solid idea here. Andrew. Age, 57. Gender, male. Andrew was reported missing for 26 days until he was found at the bottom of a lake, dead and high on drugs. Not much else is known about him. Andrew's entry is overall pretty flat. Given how much detail the others had in either execution or in concept, this is kind of a womp-womp ending, you know what I mean? I'm not gonna gripe too hard, but I feel like it could have been a lot better thought out. That's all. I like the idea that he could be tied back to Stanley, but only in vague terms. I don't know. I'll expand on my through lines later, but that's about it. This is the cast of the original game, but the remake adds a few new characters, namely Adward, Agent 30, Faith, Locke, Pike, Stranger, and the God. I tried to contact the devs of the update, but they never got back to me. So I don't know how much they have to do with the original, or what the newer version would have changed story-wise. For now, I'm gonna leave them out of my further discussions, mostly because I don't want to make assumptions when I'm already in the middle of my weird headcanon zone. But for what I know, this is just someone who wanted to expand on something else for fun, and thought it could use a little bit more vocal differentiation. The format works really well for something like this. I think that using data entries for this is a great choice, but the language in it doesn't really reflect that. The thing about these data entries is that they're written in two different tones of voice. In some, there's only facts, a simple retelling of events, dry, clinical. In others, they're weirdly casual and include a little too much editorializing for my liking. I think having a singular, consistent voice would really help a lot in the execution of this story. Take something like SCP entries, for example. Part of the reason that the Foundation succeeds in its execution is its unity of overall tone. Editorializing is limited, and when it is present, it's only in its own specific part of the entries. This allows things to feel like they're overall the same. Then there's how the tone clashes with concept. This cold, disconnected way that these entries are written have a distinct, almost clinical energy to them that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense given the cult angle. The idea of a cult people worshipping something that takes the dead and brings them back to life is pretty normal, especially given the overall proven efficacy of it in this story. However, there isn't much of a through line, and the individual entries are way too short and written way too directly. I guess you could have a medical division in a cult setting, but there's nothing that really implies the worship of anything. And that's, ironically, kind of my main complaint. For what's supposed to be a summary of what's occurred in these experiments, there's very scarce and sparse actual information. There doesn't feel like there's much of a story here. Just a few random ideas for slasher kills that occasionally reference each other. And that's not inherently a problem. But in this case, where there is objectively supposed to be a cohesive story, it doesn't communicate it very well. There's a lot of things here that boil down to a strange misinterpretation of violence and death that also lends to a more childlike look at things. Things like Hetty's AIDS, the various suicides, Klosky's entire entry. I think that a lot of this can be boiled down to being made by someone with very little experience. Things that are used purely because the image is shocking, but there's no exploration of it. But then again, there's also no glorification or exploitation like there was in something like Urban Spook, for example. It's said with the punch of a kid learning a bad word and then saying it over and over again without knowing what it actually means. I think a good guiding hand can really turn this into something great, though. Time and experience would be what elevates this from a basic first project into something incredibly special. There's truly very little you'd have to change to improve the story tenfold in my eyes, and most of those improvements boil down to expanding on really cool things that are already present in its writing. I think the author of this has a really bright future in horror if these are the only missteps in said writing. For now, though, let's take a look and see what we have. So, before we get to what I think is happening in the overall story, I want to bring up two things that I think are very important to the overall discussion of the original Orineo: sequels and spin-offs. A sequel to Orineo, Breakthrough, was published by the same developer October 27th of the same year. That's 3 months after the first. Given the amount of assets needed to make an Incredibox mod and how good the art assets of this look, the turnaround time is really impressive, at least to me. It continues the overall theme, and I was intending to put a discussion of it here, but I think I want to focus on just the original mod for now. Maybe if you're desperate wailing for a follow-up, Harmonizes just right, I'll talk about it another day. I also heard that there was supposed to be a third story that hasn't been released yet. Whether it's taking some time, or they dropped it, I don't know. That's just what I heard. I think that's a great idea, though. This universe that's being created is incredibly flexible and allows for some really great experimentation. Like I said earlier, having a start like this is really great for this developer, and I think that keeping their fun little playground around until they have no more ideas would be great for their development as not only a game dev, but as a writer as well. Next, I want to talk about the spin-offs a little bit. I don't talk about this too much in my intro, but the series that Oren Ao is a part of is called Tragibox. Not a bad title, honestly. There's a few games in this series that seem to be connected to said universe. Udayadat, Alan, Slaughter, Vanilla, Evacuate, Tragic, Breakout, Corrupt Box, Rewounded, Joy. There's so many people who want to play around in the universe that HBM created. And I think that's great. A niche, comfortable fandom who have a lot of fun remixing and playing with building blocks they were given with the ability to grow and change with the creator. People collaborating to make a really cool premise even better. I think stuff like this is a great first horror explanation for young people who don't really have a lot of contact with horror as a whole, but who really want to learn and grow in that space. People collaborating with each other to make a cool premise even better is just always great, and I'm proud to see such a cool community doing great things. Here's hoping that there isn't shit tons of community drama that I've not heard about in my research because I don't run in these circles filled with children. I simply don't want to know. Let me live in ignorance and believe that we are all holding hands together and jumping into the abyss of creating good horror content together. As for what I think is going on here with this story now, well, I think that most of these are just vignettes, so let me pull those aside for a moment. The ones that I think have no ties to anything else are Bailey, the statue, Hetty, Akature, David, and Koski. As of now, I can't think of anything meaningful that ties them to the rest of the story other than the cult acquiring them. There's things I can use to tie them to the rest of the narrative, which I'll be doing later in my rewrites, but for now, I think they're just missed opportunities and kind of one-offs that don't really bring each other to another group. Now, I don't think the rest of the cast tie directly into one another, but I think a few members have reoccurring characters. I'll call those groups the Addicts, the Band, the Apartment, the Prototypes, and the Cult, just for cleaner categorization. The Addicts, I think, are composed of Stanley, Andrew, and Hugh. There's a through line here of some kind of addiction that ends up killing all three of them. My money is on that the redacted friend in Hugh's entry referring specifically to Andrew. My pet theory is that this moment that Andrew, Hugh, and Stanley are all from the same shelter. Andrew is the supplier who is supplying the other two means with their addictions that resulted in their respective deaths. Hugh getting drunk and falling into the tiger pit, Stanley getting beaten to death. Ashamed of himself, unable to live with watching his two friends die, Andrew drowns himself in the lake. I don't think there's too much of a strong story here, and a lot of this connective tissue is shit I'm just making up on the fly, but I don't know, I think that's a good story, don't you? Next is the Band. That's just Ethan and Lilac. It's pretty explicitly stated that Lilac murdered Ethan, jealous of his talent. Blunt force trauma is a hell of a way to go, though. And that's really interesting. If you beat somebody to death, you have to really hate them, because boy howdy, you have to be hitting them for a long time. The more interesting thing is the monster that killed Lilac. It's a personal theory. I think that if fear manifested a creature like Harry, maybe rage manifested something out of Ethan that attacked and killed her on stage? Maybe. I don't know. I'm getting a little floppy, but I like it. I think the Apartment has the most connective tissue. Instead of listing out the characters for this one, I'll tell you what I think the sequence of events are. I think James is the beginning of the story. Committed suicide, hidden away in the ceiling of his apartment. He's then found by a random friend. That friend's memory of that moment later becomes Harry, the dreaming. The sound of James's horrible suffering becomes the suffering of Kurt, who is then the only one who can hear the sounds of him wailing in the walls as he suffers. He panics. He's afraid. He burns the building down. And finally, there's poor Hetty, just killed in the crossfire. A totally innocent life lost. The Apartment is the most favorite in all of the group. It has the most interesting tragedy and is one of the things that made me really perk up. I think it's a great set piece, and I think with a little bit more direct connective tissue, it has the possibility to be something really, really cool. After that's the Prototypes. They're labeled in a particular order, so let's talk about these. I think Kratz is meant to be the first. They say first attempt, and, well, there's no label for a first or even a second prototype. That's something I fucking checked, by the way. I burned through this whole thing twice because I was convinced that there had to have been a second prototype that I missed. There wasn't. They kinda just brushed past it. This is a through line I'll deal with later, but we'll keep going. Kratz is the first attempt to mimic the way a person used to be. He's dead, though. Someone who was close to death and then brought back instead of being all the way gone. Like I said, there's no second prototype, so we'll move on to the third. Before that, I do want to talk about that gap, though. I think the overall practice is interesting. Going from mimicking a little gap and then a failure to make a form leaves actually a surprising mystery here. Now we have to go back and talk about the third prototype. A success, but failing in form. Simulating pain, but not coming back. In one of the versions, it also insinuates that she's not physical, and never was. If I had to pick something to go in that gap, I think it's Akature that led to the third, but I don't know. I'm just kind of letting this go for now. Another attempt to put a person in another person is AZTF, and that's our fourth. It seems like it was an accident, but there's something interesting in the choice of words here. The wounds were more severe than we thought. I wonder if the idea here is that it really was a skin graft to save his life that brought a horrible body horror moment where they became two people. Showing that the process by which those things are made really does hold a consciousness and a form attachment. Interesting. The final experiment is... the fucking... So it looks like animal testing was the most efficient. It's that thought about being tortured that interests me, though. I think eventually leads into our final segment because, I'm gonna be real with you, I really don't want to talk about the lore implications of that fucking duck. Finally, our two cult members, Dave and Doug. Here's the thing. I only know that Dave is relevant to the whole thing because of research into Breakthrough, and there's that, and Dave is the head of the whole organization. I don't know. There's not too much there. Doug seems to have some particular tie to someone, and given who's writing the documents, I think that person's Dave. What their connection is, how angry they are at one another, why they're angry at one another, I don't fucking know. I'm tying things together, but they seem to be the only two that are directly connected to one another. I don't know. Overall, I think the story's really well put together, but needs more connective tissue. At least between its own stories, let alone between vignettes. And that's something I aim to fix with my Orineo. Now, before I actually get into what my version of this story would be, I want to make a couple things really clear. First of all, don't worry about it. I'm not going to be as harsh as I was to Urban Spook for two main reasons. First is that I can say this person isn't a bad person. If you're a dick, I'll match your energy. That's something I've always stood by. And from what I can tell, HMB is a fairly normal individual. And the other is the more prominent reason, and namely, I don't know whether or not this person's a kid. A scratch is commonly used by kids, it was made for kids, and from the way that language is used, I'd say it's probably a kid. I can't totally be sure, because that sort of rudimentary English could also be indicative of a non-native English speaker, and given the title of the series, I'm willing to think that that's probably also true, but I want to play my safe bets and not crush the dreams of a child who's making a cool thing for the first time. I'm not going to punch down, especially when there's a lot of genuinely good work here. I wanted to make these sections for things where I talk negatively about something because personally, I think it's all well and good to say where something fails, but the overall positive critique thing to do is to show where it could be better. Personally, I'm not very good at teaching. I never have been, it's why I don't do it. So, I'm just gonna show you what I think those changes would be, mainly because I, like everyone else in this community, was really affected by this story and think you could do something really fucking sick with it. So here's me doing what I think is fucking sick with it. Subject, the dreaming. Name, redacted. Age, redacted. Gender, male. Report was filed on date and time that a body had been discovered in the ventilation of redacted apartments by name and place. A friend of the victim. Name had assumed that his friend was alive and attempted to remove the body, discovering that his friend had passed only after it had been taken from the vent. He waited about 2 hours before leaving the building and calling police. Our agents intercepted law enforcement and claimed the body before their arrival. Redacted was brought to custody and convicted of murder. The dream has been showing signs of instability since reactivation, though. We believe that exposure to a third party's emotional instability during early hours of decay has caused this reaction. It's been seen attempting to speak, but only sputtering as its oral soft tissue has long since rotted away. Researchers believe it is asking for help. Such requests are to be disregarded. Subject, the charred. Name, Hart Heil. Age, 17. Gender, female. Agents were sent in the aftermath of the Echo's acquisition to assure that no evidence of interference could be recovered by law enforcement. The Chard was discovered having been trapped by a fallen support structure and subsequently asphyxiated by the smoke. Its body is in a workable condition, so agents retrieved it and brought it back to the facility. However, in retrieval, its arms had been severely damaged, so agents opted to remove them rather than disturb the rubble, as they would not have been able to be made operational again. Since being brought to optimal levels, the Chard has begun attempting to breathe under its own power. However, the damage to its throat and lungs due to smoke inhalation make this impossible. It's only capable of a rasping gasp when its lungs are manually filled with air.
Subject, the sculpture. Name, Bailey, last name redacted. Age 19, gender male. The sculpture has proved fruitful in our attempts to transfer effects from one reactivated subject to inanimate objects. Initial donor's head was encased in plaster while still functional and was terminated by an agent once it had set via cervical dislocation for cleanest results. The head was then removed and reincorporated into a damaged plaster bust. A single hole was drilled into the forehead to reintroduce ferrofluid. Reactivation occurred as predicted, and the entirety of the bust began to animate. It is not advised to use a full body at this time, as the subject currently tries to ambulate and has fallen many times, resulting in cracking and breakage. It has been permanently affixed to its base for the time being to prevent such damage. Subject, the Fanged. Name, first name, last name. Age, 36, gender, male. The subject was acquired while intoxicated and unaccompanied and brought back to the facility. In an attempt to see if animals could share consciousness with the original donor in the same manner as Gamma, the statue, and Transmission, donor was introduced to an enclosure of acquired stray dogs that had been purposely starved for 3 days and agitated via various stimuli. Donor was mauled and then consumed. Once the donor was deceased, the animals were terminated via a single shot each. They were then reactivated in unison in an attempt to see if control over the dogs was possible. Once the donor was deceased, the animals were terminated via a single shot each. They were then reactivated in unison in an attempt to see if control over the dogs was possible. Only the donor body reactivated, however. It seems that further consciousness of the dogs was absorbed into the subject and then dominated the donors. Further experimentation is necessary to see if this was a fluke, or if multiple subjects will always dominate a singular one. Subject, Gamma. Name, redacted. Age, 35, gender, female. Gamma has only been a partial success in testing. Her form did not take shape as desired, but her consciousness seemed to surface partially. An attempt was made to connect a host nervous system to various screens to see if its thoughts were able to be displayed after Beta's test showed promise with just simple soft tissue. However, when introduced to the machines, shrieking was the only audio output from the speakers. The sound was so loud and sustained that it would have destroyed a human throat within minutes. It destroyed the speakers within hours. Now only faint flickers of audio can be heard. Mouth parts occasionally displayed have been analyzed by staff well-versed in lip reading, and it has been documented that Gamma repeatedly and rapidly begs for termination. The nervous system being exposed to constant electricity is believed to be the cause. Further testing required. Subject, the Blind. Name, Ethan Tad Pole. Age, 19, gender, male. On date and time, a report was filed with police that the murder of Pole had occurred. Given the donor's unique status, agents were sent to acquire remains. Pole had been shot twice in the head, resulting in death, and then received heavy post-mortem skull and jaw fractures from being struck repeatedly in the head with a heavy, blunt object. Apparently, the suspect in the murder is believed to have bludgeoned him to death with her own instrument in a fit of rage. Agents have been placed to require the suspect as well, as researchers would like to test their reactions to one another. Subject's jaw has been shattered completely, and both eyes are damaged beyond repair. Due to this, when requested, the subject can only make a low, droning sound from the back of its throat. Subject, the Decayed. Name, Hetty Banker. Age, 18, gender, female. Researchers attempted to introduce ferrofluid into a still-living subject, and Banker volunteered as a donor. Its body was ravaged by an autoimmune disease, and it offered it in an attempt to see if exposure would cure said ailment. 5 days after exposure, there was a brief period of effective regression before the donor's body began to reject it. 7 days after exposure, the donor's immune system completely shut down, leaving only the ferrofluid as defense. 10 days after exposure, it began to take over the donor's muscles as they had become too weak to stand. 12 days after exposure, all bodily functions were operated by the fluid. Subject begins to request termination. 14 days after exposure, only low-level brainwaves are detected. Subject requests termination. 16 days after exposure, the subject self-terminates via a manual shutdown of all bodily function. Reactivation has yet to be rescheduled. Subject, the Instigator. Name, Doug. Age 45, gender male.
Donor body is acquired by agents post-mortem from Name Prison after death by lethal injection at the request of head researcher David Rui. Subject has been testing the efficacy of repeated termination and reactivation. Subject is to be terminated and reactivated on cycles of 1 hour for 30 days, with means of termination to be charged on varying intervals. Testing is to confirm how much depersonalization and mental degradation occurs between termination and reactivation. Currently, the instigator seems to be mentally unstable, and levels of stability are rapidly dropping after only 15 of the 30 days, but it is still capable of vocalization and seems to retain a sense of health. It seems to be progressively more and more determined to harm researcher Rui in particular, but he is adamant that the experiment continue. He deserves it. 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 Subject: Alpha and Zeta. Named first name and first name last name. Ages 46 and 39 respectively. Gender: male. This experiment was not planned, but far be it from us to waste an opportunity. The original experiment was a more basic trial of ferrofluid for skin grafting and organ transplants. As Alpha and Zeta were brothers, they were blood-type matches, and Zeta was used for Alpha's transplant. However, a few days after observation, strange growths began to appear. Tumors began to develop hair and teeth. Later, we observed polydactylism, and then it became a full case of monstra duplicica. Alpha and Zeta are being allowed to continue to mature to see if a second, fully formed body can form from the host. Secondary testing with other paired siblings are being proposed to heads of the department. Subject: the Siren. Name: Lilac, last name. Age: 44, gender: female. The Siren was acquired by agents as planned after the acquisition of the Blind. She was apprehended immediately following a performance and was subdued and brought on site. Disinformation was spread that she had been apprehended by local law enforcement in relation to the death of the Blind, so that her disappearance from public eye would no longer be questioned. Area law enforcement was then contacted and told to confirm the story. Researchers wanted to observe the Blind's reaction to the Siren's presence to determine if any semblance of its original consciousness was still present. The Blind immediately attacked the Siren when hearing her voice, descending on her faster than the security team could stop. Its form shifted, jaw unhinging completely to devour the Siren, but security staff prevented complete loss of its body. Research staff have decided to use the Siren in future testing to see if its emotional response can be elicited in other subjects. Subject: the Warped. Name: unknown. Age: 25. Gender: male. The donor was an unhoused man who was under the effects of psilocybin cubensis, who had been found by law enforcement running around naked in one of the local shelters. Officers were called when it was cackling and screaming nonsense as the residents began to fear for their safety. An officer on the scene tased and then attempted to subdue the suspect, but ended up terminating him in the process. A request was made to agents to have his body donated to the research team in an attempt to cover up this mistake, and acquisitions agents agreed on the condition of information regarding the Siren being disseminated as requested. Testing begins in 2 weeks. Subject: Beta. Name: not applicable. Age: not applicable. Gender: not applicable. Following successful testing in using ferrofluid to transmit and display brainwaves, Beta was constructed as a means of projecting human consciousness. An older model CRT was disassembled and then outfitted with a reactivation device and an unused donor heart. Upon reactivation, Beta began displaying various short, simple messages. Complex sentence structure seemed impossible given the current tissue sample used. However, messages relating to basic emotional responses were demonstrated and measured. A level of perception seemed to be present, and when researchers reopened Beta to see what had caused this response, the tissue and fluid had completely grown to the inside of Beta's original casing, forming rudimentary organs and new tissue. Beta began also displaying signs of great distress upon being opened, flashing red and white signals researchers now associate as a display of pain. Subject: the Whispered. Name: Kurt, redacted. Age: 12. Gender: male. Upon acquisition of subject's medical records, it was diagnosed with schizoaffective symptoms such as intense paranoia and auditory hallucinations. The subject frequently described hearing voices begging for either mercy or violence from him, as though he were the one causing harm. His parents examined and spoke with neighbors of redacted apartments, but nobody was in any sort of danger or distress. Research staff now know that the voices the Whispered were hearing were both the pleas of the dream and the rage of the hanged. The subject is believed to be the culprit of the fire that destroyed the redacted apartments, resulting in the acquisition of several subjects. The Whispered was acquired after agents recovered the body during a sweep of the rubble. It is showing great distress when put into proximity of the Dream and the Hanged. Continued experimentations, such as with the Siren and the Blind, are to be conducted. Subject, the Mimic. Name, Kratz Fur. Age, 42. Gender, male. Subject was a failed first attempt at consciousness replacement that was then repurposed for another set of testing. The donor's body was lobotomized in an attempt to see if ferrofluid resonance with brainwaves could create a copy of a secondary source's consciousness. The mimic could no longer ambulate or verbalize without the assistance of a speech device, and did not respond to external stimuli. Researchers were planning to neutralize the subject until it began to mimic researchers' thoughts verbatim without input. This was then tested on other incapacitated subjects, and results were consistent. The mimic is being utilized in communication and conveyance from other subjects no longer capable of verbal communication. Subject, the Hanged. Name, James, last name. Age, 27, gender, male. Subject was acquired by agents in the sweep of the rubble after the redacted apartment fire. After an autopsy, it was determined that the donor body was terminated before the fire had taken place via a self-inflicted cervical dislocation, presumably from hanging. Before death, the subject was described as being misanthropic and antisocial, having been declared missing weeks before the fire. Further examination of the host's body found many indications of sustained violence and poorly treated injuries. Upon reactivation, the Hanged immediately retreated into the unsecured ceiling tiles, where it has remained ever since. Researchers have begun to see that it is fusing with the support structure, and have since decided to allow it to grow in certain designated areas, as its body cannot spread further than the tissue it possesses. Subject, the Misplaced. Name, David Redacted. Gender, male. Subject was recovered during reconstruction of the redacted apartments by an early morning construction team. Workers found the body impaled by rebar in one of the makeshift site offices. Emergency services were called and notified that the subject was somehow still alive. Agents were dispatched as EMTs began to acquire the corpse and brought it to the research site. Misplaced was showing signs of life despite being severely malnourished and heavily damaged from its injuries. After DNA testing, associates of the subject were contacted and staff were notified that the donor body had been pronounced dead and was buried 3 years prior. Subject, Alpha. Name, not applicable. Age, 6. Gender, female. Animal testing was the first step before human subjects were to be reactivated, as animals do not possess the complicated mental state of a human being. It was believed to be much easier to change them fundamentally upon reactivation. Staff are currently establishing connections to local law enforcement and medical services to acquire human subjects, so agents are procuring local wildlife to use as subjects. Alpha is the first successful reactivation, with researchers discovering that the subject not only resurrected upon the process's completion, but also that it cannot be fully terminated again. Head researcher Rui has given the instruction to repeat the result before human testing can begin. Subject, the Face. Name, Koski, last name. Age, 17, gender, female. Subject was acquired upon an accidental encounter with staff. Rumored activity of our organization had not yet been suppressed, and the subject made contact during the acquisition of the Whispered. It had not yet made its information public, and was immediately neutralized by acquisition agents as per protocol. Upon researching, agents discovered that the subject had a prominent internet personality, whose disappearance began to cause problems. Reactivation was performed, and the face was able to be manipulated to appear to its following as if nothing had happened. Instead of simply ceasing its online presence, head researcher Rui instructed that its presence continue to disseminate information both advantageous to future goals, as well as obscuring past missteps. Addendum. First 5 years of operation has yielded far more fruitful results than originally promised. The project has been greenlit for 5 more. Subject, the Drowned. Name, Andrew, redacted. Age, 57, gender, male. Acquisition agents were alerted to the subject by local law enforcement approximately 30 days after the acquisition of the Warped. An officer had found that it was present during the incident and tracked it down to a local community near the docks with intent to bring it in for questioning. The officer in question, who had terminated the previous subject, also terminated this one via drowning him in the local lake. The body was found by an associate who informed agents that he had been on the same polysibes as the Warped and donated the subject to our facility. Testing will begin in tandem with the Warped to determine whether or not the subjects will be affected by their altered states when terminated. Name, David Rui. Age, 34. Designation, Head of Research and Development. Gender, male. Help me. Help me. I smell the ashes. It burns to breathe. Where are my legs? The howling won't stop. I'm not me anymore. She's still here. She's still here. I'll kill her. I'll kill her. They promised me. They promised me. They promised me. They promised me. We breathe together. Our hearts beat together. I'm sorry. 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 I can taste my own fear. Shut up. 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 I'm safe here now. I'm safe here now. The earth calls me back to it. I want to go back to the earth. I didn't see anything. I didn't see anything. I promise. I promise I didn't see anything. It's so cold. Why do my lungs burn when it's so, so cold? You brought me home again. This time, you won't be able to call for help. We hate you. 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 Overall, I think if my main complaint of this thing is that it needs more to feel satisfying, then I can hardly call it a bad thing, you know? I know I went a lot more extensive on my rewrite this time, but ultimately it was because not only did I not know how to convey what more felt like without showing you how I do it, but I was inspired by this project to really push my creative lenses as well. Whether or not you like it's up to you, but I'm fairly proud of what I did here. I think the creator of this has a really promising future, and like I said before, if you really want me to, I can dive into what I think some of the spin-offs and sequels are another time. This was a fascinating trip into something so very different from me, and I hope all of you got something out of it as well. Thank you so much for joining me in this dive into music and madness, and next time we'll be talking about something a little more frustrating. Goodbye.
That is 56 minutes of our lives we will never get back.
What the fuck was that ending?
Oh my god, Hiten is so cringe. She's either overly pretentious or overly cringe. There is no in between. Okay, so that's that. This is over. I don't think Hiten has any more videos in the of series. Yeah. I think that's just about it. We've been going at this for about 3.5 hours. Let me know if you guys want to do another Hiten watch party. especially with this other garbage ass series from Hiten, the Yap Session series. Because let me tell you, in the Yap Session videos, Hiten is so fucking hypocritical. I think its notion of quality is cringe. She's basically spending 16 minutes saying let people enjoy things. And if you know Hiten Mitsuru, you know she did not let people enjoy things. So we'll go ahead and in this here, I'll put up the end screen. And I'll bid you all adieu. Feel free to join the server link if you haven't. It's the pinned comment. I'll be in there shortly after the stream, probably writing my manga or something.
Check it out, I'm in the house like carpet. And if there's too many heads in my blunt, I won't spark it out. Put it in my pocket and save it like rocket fuel. To everybody's got and is cool, then I spark it up with my brother. His mama named him Moan, what I call a Moan lover. And he's more than a cover, he's a quilt. We're putting shit together like the house that John built on a hill. Cause this you're gonna feel like velvet turtle. My style fits tighter than a girdle. If you hate it, then you can just leave it like Beaver. But in a day or two I'll make you a true believer in me. Cause like the alphabet you'll see, there ism kits a rhyme, not your everyday soliloquy. Like Chef 4RD, a rhyme is truly cooking. Piece of Matty Rich, cause he's straight out of Brooklyn, New York. I don't eat pork or swine when I dine. I drink a cup of Kool-Aid, not a big glass of wine or rockin'. And if you have time, I drop rhyme again.